subscribe, like the video, and, if possible, join Patreon. But if you don't have much money, you can support the channel by watching the novels on euroaudiobooks.com. Remember that you can participate in the polls so that your favorite novel gets published for free.
Became brighter and brighter, and the Ryatsu contained in it became more terrifying. Until, with a wave of his hand, he threw it to the end of his sight, far away from Shuya Palace. The Shuya Palace, which was built with great difficulty, cannot be affected by such a flash of Wang Su. After a mushroom cloud covering the sky rose again in the distance, the crisis was completely resolved. But Shendu turned around and came to Cortez's side. Without further ado, a chestnut hit her on the head immediately. Idiot! Shendu had an expression of hatred. Do you still remember what I told you before? It is forbidden to use Wang Su's flashes near Shuya Palace. Cortez covered his head, with tears in his eyes, and looked around blankly. Aren't I outside the Hueco Mundo? How did you catch up to the Shuya Palace? Cortez, who was immersed in the battle, would not care about changes in the surrounding environment at all until the battle was over. Seeing her stupid look, Shendu could only sigh helplessly. He casually threw the black cat Yuruchi to Cortez and ordered, "Look, don't let her get away." Regardless of the pain in his forehead, Cortez quickly reached out to catch the black cat Yuruchi. Dang even felt a huge force coming from above. Yuruchi the black cat tries to break free from Cortez and escapes. But this cat, Cortez subconsciously embraced her in his arms. It's so strong. The black cat Yuruchi only felt black in front of his eyes, as if his eyes were covered by something, followed by a deep sense of suffocation. A cat's face was covered with softness and sunken deep in it. No, no, no. She resisted with all her strength, but facing Cortez, who was Vasto Lord, the strength of this resistance was really limited. Even if the black cat Yuruchi rolled his eyes white, Cortez did not let go. Shendu walked slowly in front of Nilu. During the battle, she showed the posture of a half-goat, but still showed her proud figure and innocent and kind eyes. The long lake green hair hangs down to the waist, and there are rose-colored horizontal facial lines on the cheeks, and almost half of the face is covered by the antelope-like bone mask. The gray-brown eyes were filled with mist. When Shendu was walking towards her, Nilu quickly ran towards Shendu, grabbed Shendu's right hand with a familiar look, and looked at it seriously. She was relieved until she found that there was no scar on it. Oh, it's fine. Nilu patted her tall chest and suddenly trembled. The last thing I want is to see someone get hurt because of me. Obviously, in the angle of her line of sight, Shendu was protecting her, thus blocking the flash of Wang Su's flash. Are you Nelial too, Odell Schwank? The corners of Shindu's mouth raised slightly, but he didn't try to defend himself. Nilu raised her head in a daze, obviously not understanding why the strange Minos Grande in front of her knew her name. Join Espada. Shendu stretched out his hand to invite. The way to avoid meaningless battles is to make the world no longer have one's own enemies. Nilu stared into Shendu's eyes generously, as if she was thinking about something. A moment later, she was smiling like a beautiful flower blooming in the desert of Hueco Mundo. Although I don't understand what you're talking about, but you're the first person who is willing to protect me, and I am willing to fight to protect you. Nilu's intuition told her that although the Ryatsu in front of her was powerful, she was not as tyrannical as the other Minos Grande. On the contrary, there is only reason in his blood-red eyes. In this regard, Nilu chose to believe in Shendu and accepted his invitation for this reason. If you plant flowers deliberately, the flowers will not bloom. But if you plant willows unintentionally, they will make shade. This is Shendu's mood at the moment. Although Cortez often caused troubles because of his belligerence and stubbornness, this time he really made a great contribution. The addition of Nilu represents the gathering of all members of Espada. The complete unification of Hueco Mundo will also be achieved in the near future. Then, a new journey will begin. The 11th step towards the ultimate has been completed. Template progress, 60%, 65%. Unlock the rat charm. Current abilities, dragon body, fire magic energy, demon magic, dragon charm, pig charm, horse charm, mouse charm. Ryatsu, Super Lingwei. The unlocking of another bug-level spell ability made Shendu feel a little joy in his heart. The Rat Charm, turning static into dynamic, can give the statue resurrection and its original ability, but it is not clear how much strength it will reduce. He has been thinking about some applications of the Rat Charm for a long time. He had Sailaporo carve statues of various sizes into it as early as the construction of the Palace of the Night began. Most of them are dominated by Espada. Only a few sculptures are Ajuches or Jillian with other special abilities. Shindu's eyes are deep, looking at the Shia Palace in the distance. The towering white wall stands in the desert, bringing a strong sense of oppression. Perhaps we can create an army of Espada. 100 million inch. Chapter 71. Everyone. Can you provide us with a plan for occupying this world? Void Night Palace. Test site number 36. Shindu casually smashed Sailaporo into pieces, and the powder flew into the air for a while. The strength is only 1/10 of the original. It's impossible to participate in captain-level battles, but it's okay to guard Shuya Palace firsthand. The Rat Charm is not as powerful as imagined, although this ability to turn stillness into movement is extremely buggy, but at the same time, the strength of the revived statue is only 1/10 of the original body. In fact, the most outrageous thing about this thing is the thought and memory. After turning static into dynamic, the sculpture has the same memory and thoughts as the ontology. The one most suitable for the rat spell ability was Sailaporo. Of course, it is not perfect. When the two Sailaporo conduct scientific experiments, conflicts tend to erupt. Under the fury of the main body, if he didn't hold back, he would turn all of him into living materials. The ability of the Rat Charm has yet to be developed. Shindu made a conclusion. Although the effect is not great in battle, it may be used to transform and build the world. Not all of the Lord's spells are suitable for combat. As a demon mage, in a sense, he is almost omnipotent. This also makes him the absolute strongest among his brothers and sisters. Perhaps only Ju Lan can break arms with the Lord. Of course, some demon magic has more or less disadvantages. The Holy Lord doesn't care about this, but Shindu can't be careless. What he needs is not a barren world, but a perfect dragon dynasty. His Majesty, Santos flew in from outside the palace in a rush of September 40, with strong winds sweeping through. The entire Hueco Mundo has been explored, and the dominion of the Void Palace has expanded to all areas. Improved versions of the heralds have been distributed to the various errand cars. It has been a month since Nilu was subdued. The unification plan, which was already nearing completion, was finally completed today. Convene the Espada. Conduct a meeting. Shindu conveyed the order, and Santos flapped his wings excitedly and disappeared into the palace. Although this guy has achieved errand car, he still has 4 wings, and in terms of pure speed, it is enough to surpass most errand cars in Hueco Mundo. Espada Conference Room. It has been remodeled to varying degrees in the way Shindu remembers. The overall atmosphere is still dominated by depression. According to the order of Espada, neat high-back chairs are arranged in front of the conference table. The main color of the whole body is white, which makes this 100,000 meeting room look more solemn. So complicated, Stark was lying on the conference table with a lifeless face, without the slightest demeanor, like a dying, salted fish. Hurley Bell pulled up his high collar, covering half of his cheeks, and treated everyone with an indifferent attitude. Only when he saw Shindu at the front did a smile burst into his green eyes. Nilu, who was sitting next to her, looked around curiously. It was the first time for her to come to the Espada meeting room. Everything in it made her feel very novel and interesting. Ulquiorra sat upright in his seat, straightened his back, and became the most compliant among the Espadas. As for Cortez's eyes, full of fighting spirit, staring at Stark, he was already ready to challenge him after the meeting room was over. Grimjow seemed very silent, without the slightest vigor like before. Not long ago, he was beaten up by Cortez again. There is still a large gap in strength between Ajucha's Arrancar and Vasto, Lord Arrancar. This also strengthened Grimjow's determination to evolve into the Vasto Lord. Sailaporo fiddled with the sculpture's fragments, trying to figure out the magical power of the rat charm to turn stillness into movement. Since he surrendered to Shendu, all the mysterious abilities that Shendu has shown have broken his understanding of the world. Now Sailaporo has no other thoughts to study what is broken than conception. The power of various spells and demon magic is enough to immerse him in it, unable to extricate himself. Not to mention, there is also the scientific research system about Shinigami passed down from Kuratsuchi Mayuri. The last Luther, Ben, and Santos, as the weakest members of Espada, sat upright, not daring to make any changes. Any one of these terrifying guys present is enough to tear them alive. If it weren't for the Shendu suppression, it would be impossible for them to sit here so peacefully and participate in the so-called Espada meeting. It's a nice start. Shendu sits upright at the front. Lying down is responsible for delivering spirits from the Soul Society pass to each Espada. At that time, the strong smell of alcohol permeated the entire Espada conference room. Talk about the development and construction of the Void Palace, Sailaporo. The old god Shendu was there, and even issued the first meeting order. He is quite satisfied with the Espada team he built. As the former king of Hueco Mundo, Barragan Luzenbaron has already served as a stepping stone to help Shendu reach the top of Arankar, and his death is not in vain. As for Neutra, he was just an unfamiliar wild dog, full of killing thoughts, and he was even more despicable when fighting. Shendu doesn't like him at all. Compared to Grimjow, the two are not on the same level at all. Then there are Zamari and Aranilo. These two guys Shendu didn't even see. They were crushed by Cortez. But two Ajuches for a Vasto Lord. No matter how you look at it, this deal is a blood profit. Overall construction has been completed. Sailaporo put down the fragments in his hand. It's just that the fine points still need to be refined. In addition, the Palace of Espada is basically completed. As the main architect of Shuya Palace, Sailaporo, in addition to perfecting the construction according to his own aesthetics, also used the technology and materials provided by Kuratsuchi Mayuri to deeply optimize Suyai. Of course, those Espada sculptures were Shendu's idea. Sailaporo believes that this decoration is completely inconsistent with the main color of the Palace of the Night and asks for its removal. However, after being pulled over by Shendu to talk for a while, he also gave up this unrealistic idea. The first rule of Shuya Palace, Shendu, is the sky. As for the expansion and construction, I think further research is needed. Sailaporo is absolutely professional in this area. The sky cover will be completed soon, and tomorrow the entire Void Knight Palace will be covered by sunlight. In addition, there are new results from the Arancarization experiment. According to the data, it is basically possible to achieve 100% Arancarization. The premise is that the experimental subjects need to be above Ajuches. While speaking, he tapped the conference table 3 times, and a Uzumaki appeared in the center of the conference table. With the opening of Uzumaki, Daowang shines in front of Kiando. Finally, the communication method between Soul Society and Shuya Palace was also researched by us. Sailaporo explained, there is still some information, and Kuratsuchi Mayuri will report to you in detail. As the hands-off shopkeeper, Shendu watched the scene in front of him with great interest. Hello, Your Majesty Shendu, fellow Espada. Kuratsuchi Mayuri's weird smile appeared on the light curtain. Compared with the last time we met, this guy's appearance has changed again. The stripes on the black and white mask are intertwined and intertwined, giving people a sense of chaos. I believe that everyone has received the improved version of the Divine Order Messenger, right? Kuratsuchi Mayuri tapped his temple and made a bang sound. The effective range of this thing is close to infinite. Even cross-world calls can be completed. The only drawback is that in areas with high density of spiritual particles, it may be disturbed to a certain extent. Not long ago, the Soul Society reselected room 46, which was still an old thing selected from among the nobles. He let out a sneer, which seemed to be very disdainful. Regarding the enhancement of Minos Grande, I came up with 3 plans and handed them over to Sailaporo. Kuratsuchi Mayuri has no less bullshit than Sailaporo. When the two are put together, This feature is brought into full play to the ultimate. They didn't stop talking until Shendu got a little impatient. That's pretty much it. Kuratsuchi Mayuri still has more ideas. As for the Soul Society, I didn't mean to conquer Hueco Mundo, but I also organized a reconnaissance team. The intelligence team, headed by Sui Feng, will formally enter Hueco Mundo to investigate relevant information in the near future. Upon hearing this name, Shindu's black cat froze immediately, and a bitter look appeared on the cat's face. What is this? It's not enough for the former captain of the second team to join in, so let's add a current captain of the second team, right? If this goes on like this, I'm afraid the next generation of the Feng family, Sui Feng, will take office ahead of schedule. Even if he got involved directly, Yoruichi didn't think that in just a few decades, Sui Feng's strength had already surpassed himself. What's more, even if you surpass it in an all-around way, when facing a monster of Shindu's level, there is no chance of winning at all. On a cat face, the features are crowded together, making it difficult to distinguish each other. What kind of cat is Sui Feng suitable for? Shindu asked suddenly, which made Yoruichi instantly think of the picture of the future. Two cats are fighting and chasing each other in the Shuya Palace, getting entangled. This scene is too scary. The black cat shivered and subconsciously hid towards a warm place. Although Yoruichi didn't answer, Shindu didn't take it to heart either. As for Sui Feng's arrangement, he had already planned it when he heard the relevant information. That's about it. Kuratsuchi Mayuri seemed to recognize the black cat Shindu was petting. Miss Yoruichi, how is life in Koya Palace? During this time, there's been a lot of turmoil in the world. Black cat Yoruichi's expression froze, and he raised his eyes to look at the light curtain in the center of the conference table, with a fierce look in his eyes. Have Urahara Kisuk and the others been discovered by the Soul Society? Kuratsuchi Mayuri spread his hands and said in a helpless tone, although I really want to find out the whereabouts of that guy Urahara, but he hides deeper than anyone else. Hirako Shinji was bumped into by an unknown Shinigami and reported to Ichiban. At the moment, Shiba of the 10th Division is all in one, and under the command of the Commander-in-Chief. They are encircling and suppressing them. But that guy just turned a blind eye and turned a blind eye. He has no ambition to work at all. The present world has been messed up by them, and there is no peace. Black Cat Yoruichi heaved a sigh of relief when he heard that. As members of the 5 noble families, she had dealt with Shiba with all her heart, and she knew exactly what kind of person he was. At least when facing his former colleagues, he would never kill him. Shiba Isen is not that kind of obstinate old school, or the whole Shiba family is not that kind of obstinate old-fashioned existence. At least, the present world is still safe. Childish thinking. Shindu seemed to see through the black cat Yoruichi's mind. Yoruichi, which world do you think I will attack first after Hueco Mundo is unified? The black cat's soft body suddenly seemed to be petrified, stiff to the ultimate. Now, in this world, she stumbled and guessed, as expected of His Majesty. Kuratsuchi Mayuri bowed on the light curtain. His expression was extremely weird, as if he was crazy. I really want to see what kind of means that guy Urahara will come up with, and the final outcome of 5.9 will be. Before he finished speaking, Sailaporo directly closed the call. Kuratsuchi Mayuri was always outspoken, and he was worried that Shindu would take his anger on him if he poked a little bit more. The pain of scratching the soul is really too outrageous. Sailaporo seemed to recall the unbearable past, and his body trembled instinctively with fear. Your Majesty Shindu, are you just joking? Yoruichi sneered. This expression appeared on the cat's face, which was really a bit out of place. Shindu caressed its back, felt the soft and smooth hair, and enjoyed the pleasure of stroking the cat. What do you think? He asked rhetorically, should I be like that Berrigan guy and stick to Hueco Mundo forever? Hearing this, Black Cat Yoruichi tentatively said, there is nothing wrong with Hueco Mundo. Recently, the construction here has gradually tended to be in Siriidii, and even some of them have exceeded. Before she finished speaking, she was picked up by Shindu and looked at those blood-red eyes. So tell me, when you're in someone else's game, what do you do? The black cat Yoruchi subconsciously avoided Shindu's direct gaze, and the cat's tail was hooked back in front of him. She obviously didn't know the answer to this question, but there was a vague guess in her heart that this other should refer to Aizen. Shindu did not force her to answer, but turned his gaze to Espada again, with a gentle smile on the corner of his mouth. Everyone, regarding the occupation of the present world, do you have any recommended plans? Chapter 72, Three-Party Plan. We have a common goal. Launch a war and fight against the strong. Grimjow punched the conference table with a loud bang. As a qualified combat madman, he advocated directly launching a war and fighting the Soul Society head-on. In this regard, Shendu himself does not care, but his Espada may not be able to withstand it. The one Yamamoto Jinri Isai, Shigekuni, who is enough to destroy the world alone, can easily slaughter all the Espadas. Not to mention, there is an Aizen the subordinates who have finally been subdued cannot just be buried in the opponent's hands. Madness. Sailaporo made no secret of his sarcastic disdain for Grimjow. Do you know the information about the Soul Society? How many captain-level Shinigami does the opponent have? What kind of backup methods do they have? And what kind of ability does the captain-level Shinigami Zampakit have? As a scientific researcher, he is also the most cautious existence in Espada. Before the battle, Sailaporo often collects enough intelligence on the opponent to achieve the result of winning without any effort. It was the same even when facing Shendu. It's just that the increase in Shindu's strength has somewhat exceeded the limit of Sailaporo's ability to handle it. Even if he tried his best to create the strongest replica doll in history, he still couldn't defeat Shendu. In the end, he signed a contract of selling himself, and he was completely reduced to a slave. Of course, even if its status is placed in Shuya Palace, it is considered extremely high. Grimjow was speechless for a moment, then looked at Sailaporo with a stinging look. But Cortez, who was beside him, unintentionally released a strong Ryatsu, which immediately calmed down Grimjow like a cat. I was beaten so many times that it created a psychological shadow. Cortez's desire to fight far exceeds him. In this regard, Grimjow feels ashamed. Let's start with Visored first. SAR 17 Polo has information about the present world, also obtained from Kuratsuchi Mayuri. After researching about this group of hollow Shinigami, it may be possible to find a way to further strengthen Arrancar's power. At the same time, it is also possible to analyze the research progress of Aizen in this regard. Aizen Suk, the name is no secret among Espadas. Being the only one who can help Minos Grande Arrancar is meaningful enough to make Hueco Mundo even think twice. Even for Espada, Aizen is a presence to be reckoned with. Decades have passed since they were hollowed out. Shindu's eyes are burning. I believe that with Aizen's talent, it is enough to make great progress and even cross-dimensional progress in this area. Throughout the history of Soul Society, how many people can compare with Aizen? Even standing on the opposite side, Shindu still appreciates Aizen's talent. It's just too arrogant. The Soul Society is a huge world, but Urahara Kisuk is in his eyes. For the rest, even if it was Yamamoto Jinryu Zai, Aizen didn't pay much attention to it and just targeted it with the special Minos Grande fire extinguishing prince. This, Sailaporo, is helpless. No matter how much progress is made, some basic elements can be analyzed. The significance of Visor to us lies in the research value. Both me and Kuratsuchi Mayuri firmly believe that Shinigami's Hollow and Minos Grande's Shinigamization have something in common. Once it is unearthed, it will be a force that can change the world pattern. Shindu nodded, agreeing with his point of view. In fact, in addition to this, Quincy should be added. In this world, mixed blood is king. There are not only Shinigami and Hollow Shinigami in this world, but even the pure-blooded Quincy has a big family. It's a good start. Shindu finalized the plan. Let's start with Visored first. As for the action, you picked up Yoruchi. I will set off with Hurley Bell and Nilu. The rest are responsible for guarding the Shuya Palace. The Espadas have no objection to this arrangement. The only objection was that Shindu arranged for him to live in the palace. A thorny head like Cortez must be rectified. Then, The meeting ends here. Shendu waved, dismissed Espada, and then threw the black cat Yoruchi to Nilu. These two guys surprisingly have a common language. When he was with Nilu, it was also the most peaceful time for Yoruchi. Of course, this is also due to Tion's innocent and kind personality. Yoruchi tried to trick Yoruchi into letting her go, but he refused and said sternly that although she could not stop her from escaping from a Void Knight Palace, she would report to Shendu as soon as possible. After hearing this answer, the black cat Yoruchi completely gave up the idea of escaping. In her opinion, the existence of Shendu is no different from a terrifying monster beyond the three views. The ability to transform a Shinigami into a cat alone is enough to scare anyone. After all, not everyone can adapt to the body of an animal in a short period of time like her. If you want to deal with monsters, you can only let the existence of the same monsters take action. Perhaps we can only pin our hopes on Yamamoto Yuen Lusai or Urahara Kisuk. In Yoruchi's heart, Urahara Kisuk is no different from a monster. Only those means that emerge in endlessly can be confronted head-on. Present world. Karakura Town. Urahara store. It has been several months since Shihoin Yoruchi went to Hueco Mundo. Until now, there is still no news of the slightest bit. If there are no accidents, Miss Yoruchi should have had an accident. Urahara Kisuk looked around with a serious expression, and Visored had different expressions, and the overall appearance was very negative. Even the most irritable Saragaki Hayori was not the first to jump out when mentioning this matter. The impression Shendu left on her at the beginning was a bit too deep. Until now, Saragaki Hayori still has a lot of psychological shadow. As for the other Visored members, they couldn't think of any good countermeasures. There is no delay in finding Yoruchi. Urahara Kisuk is the one who takes this matter the most. In any case, get news of her in Hueco Mundo, dead or alive. When it came to the end, his tone was obviously a bit low, and he obviously didn't think Shihoin Yoruchi's situation would be very good. After all, the place she was going to was the Hueco Mundo center of Minos Grande, the Void Palace, which was full of tyranny and cruelty. Hirako Shinji put his head on the table, like a pig's head about to be slaughtered. Although I don't want to admit it, but Yoruchi is the former captain of the second squad, known as the Flash Goddess. His dead fish eyes seemed lifeless. In terms of Shuinpa and concealment alone, I don't think anyone present can be better than her. Even Yoruchi is planted in Hueco Mundo, Hirako Shinji said here, as if he did not continue. But what he meant was very clear. In this case, no matter who is replaced, there is a high probability that the car will be overturned. Idiot, can you just let it go like this? Saragaki Hayori couldn't listen anymore, jumped up and hit Hirako Shinji on the head with a slipper. Although this kind of behavior is a bit irrational, Hachigen whispered, but I still suggest to look for Mississippi, in case she just got lost in Hueco Mundo. Before he finished speaking, he was frightened back by everyone looking at him as a fool. Shihoin Yoruchi lost? How could such a thing happen to her? Even if the whole Soul Society's dead Shendu gets lost, Shihoin Yoruchi will not appear in this situation. Ahem. Urahara Kisuk interrupted everyone's gaze, drawing attention to him. In this case, the matter is settled for the time being. I will go to Hueco Mundo with Hirako Shinji to investigate. While speaking, he pulled out a black cloak from under the table, which was covered with dense lines. This is the latest revision of the Spirit Cover Cloak, which can perfectly cover your own Ryatsu, and it will not even reveal a little bit during the battle. At the same time, it also has the effect of concealing the characteristics of life, and with the number 26 Bakud Bent Light, it is enough to easily achieve invisibility. Since being discovered by Shendu during the last battle, Urahara Kisuk has devoted himself to researching and improving the Black Cloak. After its deduction, it may be the Ryatsu fluctuation of the 26 Bakud Bent Light, which caused him to be discovered by Shendu, who was hiding in the dark. So much so that he improved the latest version of the Spirit Cloak. However, what Urahara Kisuk doesn't know, the reason why Shendu perceives everything is not at all the characteristics of Ryatsu and vital signs, but the soul. Shendu, who possesses the power of the sheep charm, can sense the souls of everything around him. Any concealed kid and spirit implements are like decorations in front of him. This spiritual tool. Hirako Shinji held the spirit cloak in his hand and looked at it seriously. It does have some uses, but don't count on it. Urahara Kisuk nodded, expressing that he was very clear. The number of Minos Grande is inexhaustible, and how many Minos Grande with special abilities were born among them is not known at all. This is like Shinigami's Zampakit, which cannot be fully counted at all. If there is a Minos Grande who is too developed to detect nerves, he will still be able to see through the disguise of the spirit cloak. It's all about being careful. The main purpose of this trip is to find out the current state of Uruchi. The plan for the second expedition to Hueco Mundo was thus set. Not long after Visored and others went to the underground space of the Urahara store, the new portal opened directly on the empty ground. As Urahara Kisuk and Hirako Shinji stepped into it, the enveloping Madara light curtain also produced bursts of shaking. Soul Society. A team house. Raijin Jaka, who was disguised as a crutch by Yamamoto Jinryuzai, with his eyes slightly closed, casts endless majesty on his old face, showing his aura as the captain of Godii 13. He's not in a good mood right now. The members of Central 46 have just been selected not long ago, and they are still dominated by the 5 nobles except the Shiba family, supplemented by other higher-level nobles. At the same time, the authority of the 7th Division, the Inner Court Guard, was also limited to the limit. The members of the 7th Division are not even qualified to enter the scope of the underground meeting hall again, and can only guard from outside. The periphery of the underground chamber is in charge of the elite members of the 5 nobles, many of whom have retired from Godii 13. But now they are not responsible for guarding the court, but become the dogs of Central 46 Room 46, which was completely slaughtered, was raised to the ultimate level of vigilance. Usually, those captains can still go to the underground meeting hall 137 to make proposals. Now, even he, the captain, had to be recruited if he wanted to go to the underground meeting hall. However, the order of the 46 room can be accurately conveyed to any corner of Siriidii through the emissary. In other words, the current Siriidii has truly become the center of Central 46. That's why Yamamoto Jinryusai was annoyed. Although he is stubborn and old-fashioned, it does not mean that he is an idiot. On the contrary, being able to become the chief captain for 1,000 years is not only because of the force that surpasses the Soul Society. In some respects, the wisdom of Yamamoto Jinryusai is quite sufficient. Captain Suifeng, after going to Hueco Mundo, everything is about protecting yourself. His slightly closed eyes slowly opened, and a red line of fire flashed across them. Don't fall in love with it. Until now, most of the Hueco Mundo was unknown and dangerous. Facing the command from the head of the team, Suifeng, who had just taken over as the captain of the second team, suddenly had an excited expression on his face and quickly responded, "Yes, Captain Yamamoto." For this mission, she attaches great importance to it. As a fangirl who has been looking up to Shihoin Uruchi, she strives to replace Shihoin Uruchi after he defected. And this mission will undoubtedly make her famous among the captains. There is a formal crossing gate in the first team, which is enough to lead to the circle. Under the leadership of Chur Sasakaibe, Suifeng led an intelligence team covered in black and walked straight into the world transmitting gate. Rukongai. Suburbs, underground research room. The sound of grunting sounded from time to time on the equipment. A slender figure in black armor stood silently in the middle of the room. The long white hair over the shoulders hangs down. The ferocious horn mask exudes a terrifying hostility. The killing intent is almost condensed in a substance, and a faint red Ryatsu surrounds it. The sharp blade-like arms hang down to the sides of the body, and the empty hole in its chest is filled with unknown white matter, wriggling like a living thing. In the emotionless eyes, there was a touch of bright gold. Captain Aizen, is this simple plan really successful? Ian looked at the fierce figure in front of him. A trace of indiscernible solemnity flashed in his azure blue eyes. Facing the Minos Grande created by Aizen, he is not sure of victory, and even has a feeling that his life is threatened. Aizen stretched out his right hand, slowly opened and closed. A touch of dark purple flashed across his palm. Facing opponents like Shendu, the simpler the more effective. He looked at the figure ahead, and the scattered Ryatsu became more and more terrifying. Shubai will surprise us. Chapter 73 from today onwards. You belong to me completely. Shendu didn't know that his Void Knight Palace was being missed by many forces. At this time, he was immersed in the process of how to attack the Black Cat Shihoin Yoruchi. Although this guy has many unreliable places on weekdays, overall, he is still a trustworthy existence. However, due to the difference in identity between the two, if you want Shihoin Yoruchi to be convinced and surrender completely, you need to use some special means. The Black Cat was lying on its back. Its golden eyes were full of loveless expression. Not long ago, she had just returned to her original state, but before she could be happy, she was pushed down by a certain beast and completely controlled it with a strong posture. Shendu leaned against the head of the bed, picked up the Black Cat again casually, held it in his arms, and stroked the extremely soft hair. There are faintly visible dots of imprints in it. At first, Shihoin Yoruchi still had a lot of resistance, but in front of Shendu's dragon body, everything was futile. Golden eyes and red eyes looked at each other. Hey, from today onwards, you belong to me completely. Shendu seemed very domineering, completely disregarding Yoruchi's ideas. Damn guy. For a moment, a fierce light flashed in the golden eyes, and Yi Ji tried to scratch forward. However, she was pulled over by Shendu, and the human face and the cat face were printed together. Woo! Facing Shendu's strength, Yoruchi has nothing to do. Quietly, Shendu used the power of the monkey charm again to restore Yoruchi to his original form. Before reappearing, it's better to get this guy out of the way first. Otherwise, it would be very troublesome to make some mistakes. In this case, the sky is getting longer. In order to prevent Shihoin Yoruchi from making trouble, she is the most peaceful and easy to control when she is in the Black Cat state. It is enough for Shendu to hold it in his arms. So much so that when he reappeared in the corridor outside Shuya Palace, he hugged the Black Cat in one hand and held a wine glass in the other. Shendu fell in love with this liquor after tasting it in Soul Society and asked Kurisuchi Mayuri to provide a considerable amount of liquor, which was sent to Shuya Palace for storage. And Shendu also reserves a lot of spirits in his own different dimension space. As a different dimensional space where the minions of evil dragons live, other creatures cannot survive, but it is still very simple to store some items, such as spirits. From time to time, wine dripped, but it happened to fall into the mouth of the Black Cat Yoruchi. But within a short period of time, Yoruchi's face flushed and his head became dizzy from drinking. Compared with Shendu's drinking capacity, Yoruchi doesn't know how much worse it is. What's more, the spirits provided by Kuratsuchi Mayuri to Shendu are all flavored versions. Even other alcoholic captains, such as Kairuko, Shunsui, Matsumoto Ranjaku, and his ilk, rarely order such spirits in taverns. Not to mention the added version. So much so that when Kuratsuchi Mayuri placed an order with the tavern owner thought that the director of the Technology Development Bureau was planning to do some dangerous experiments. Shendu pinched Shihoin Yoruchi's cheek with 2 fingers, and then let go after rubbing for a long time. He was going to go outside the Night Palace, because just now, Santos led his scout Minos Grande troops and found a Shinigami team in Hueco Mundo. They're dressed in black, covering their whole bodies. Leading the charge is White Captain Haori, who is petite and not even as tall as some Minos Grande's arms. If there is no accident, it should be Suifeng mentioned in the information of Kuratsuchi Mayuri. Under the command of Central 46, come to Hueco Mundo to find information about Shendu. It's just that Suifeng is even more unbearable than Shihoin Yoruchi, and he was discovered before he even entered the vicinity of Shuya Palace. The information is gone. Do you want a Black Cat? Due to Suifeng's own Shuimpa level, no matter who Espada comes forward, he can't catch him back intact. It's okay to fight, but for Espada, it's too difficult for them to capture alive. So much so that Shendu was ready to do it himself. By the way, let the sisters who haven't seen each other for decades reunite. In Hueco Mundo, on the endless white sand, A row of black figures walk neatly in it. It is different from the wandering soldiers of Kuratsuchi Mayuri before. In a sense, the team members of the 2nd Division have a much higher overall quality than the 12th Division, or even far beyond. Because of the different duties between the two teams, the 2nd team often has to do some tasks such as assassination, intelligence gathering, execution, and so on. It is responsible for testing Lingbo, status, and inventions, which belong to the logistics force. This also led to the low overall combat effectiveness of the members of the 12th Squad, and it was not suitable to go to Hueco Mundo at all. Be careful, the petite Suifeng reminded. According to the information provided by that Jillian, the Void Knight Palace is not far from here. Her feathers were stained with a little blood, as if she was telling about the fierceness of the previous battle. The amount of Minos Grande in Hueco Mundo is a bit more than they expected. It has been nearly a week since I entered Hueco Mundo, and besides the ordinary miscellaneous fish, various Jillians are also emerging and endlessly. What's more, it has an appearance that is completely different from Jillian's in cognition, and has a wisdom that is not inferior to that of human beings. And they are strictly hierarchical, neat, and orderly. The appearance of scenes inevitably made Suifeng think that Hueco Mundo had already given birth to a civilization system that was not weaker than Soul Society at all. Once this thought came up, even Suifeng was taken aback, and even had the urge to return to the Soul Society to report the situation immediately. But reason restrained her. Yu's experience in the 2nd team told her that before there is enough information, everything is just her guess. Not long ago, they even learned about the Void Knight Palace from a wise Jillian, and heard the title His Majesty Shendu. This also gave Suifeng the idea of going to Shuya Palace to find out. We just need to observe the periphery of Shuya Palace. Suifeng's face was cold, and there was a trace of anxiety and worry in his eyes. The 6th sense told her that this place was very dangerous, but for the mission, she had to move on. It's really in order. Shendu stood at a high altitude and looked down at the figure below. It seems that without you, the 2nd team has not regressed much. Suifeng is a good captain. Yuruchi, the black cat in his arms, rolled his eyes and complained, "So what if it's so good? I don't think Suifeng can escape from you." After discovering the traces of Suifeng and others, Yuruchi was completely desperate. Facing Shendu, even a few captains may not be able to win. If there is only one Suifeng, it is almost a certain death situation. If it wasn't for Shendu's intention to kill, the Shinigami of this team would have died tragically in Hueco Mundo just now. Just being a black cat always feels almost meaningless. Shendu stroked his chin and said thoughtfully, "How about black and white? When the time comes, you and Suifeng will be on the same side, standing on the shoulders of both sides." Hearing this, Yuruchi subconsciously imagined a picture in his mind. It's just slightly different from Shindu's picture. She and Suifeng, who had recovered their original appearance, were lying on the sides of Shendu respectively. The wheat-colored skin and fair skin complement each other. The black cat shivered, then shook his head again and again, desperately trying to get that thought out of his mind. But then a wry smile appeared on her face. Judging by Shendu's domineering character, the scene he imagined just now is not impossible. So far, it seems that only acceptance is left. Below, another encounter took place. The difference is that what Suifeng and the others encountered this time was no longer ordinary miscellaneous fishes or Jillians, but chukas, cannon fodder ajuchas created by Sailaporo for combat. After collecting a large number of Minos Grande souls that failed the experiment, Shendu solidified them and gave them to Sailaporo. Adhering to the principle of recycling waste, Sailaporo made it into ajuchas with only combat awareness. Then, like casting a net, it was thrown to every corner of the virtual circle. When encountering such a creature as Feishu, it will enter a combat state. Ajuchas. Suifeng showed surprise on his face, and he was more sure that the front is Shuya Palace. Otherwise, there will be no Minos Grande of this level. Without hesitation, the members of the 2nd team immediately entered the fighting state. As the elites in Shinigami, their level of strength is worthy of recognition. Baikad number 4 this row. Baikad number 30. Mouth flashes 3 times. The thundering carriage, the crack of the spinning wheel, this thing has light gathered and divided into 6. Baikad's 61 6-stick light prison. In just a split second, the condensed spiritual power turned into a golden rope and flew out from the fingertips of a Shinigami until Cass left. Immediately afterwards, 3 huge, sharp-beaked light beams appeared out of thin air at the vital points of that Ajuch's. Successive Baikad usages form a perfect chain of control, until the last 61 Baikad, the appearance of the 6-stick light prison completely blocked Ajuch's in it. Just at the moment when it is controlled, another 2 Shinigami soldiers, Shuinpa, came in front of them, with their right hands raised high. A red light bloomed on it, and the thick eldest son gathered in it. O King of Kings, the mask of flesh and blood, Vientian, fluttering wings, and the name of human beings, burning heat and strife, across the sea to the south, stepped forward. They chanted the kid mantra in unison, and Ryatsu was highly condensed, forming a crimson fireball floating in front of them. Had's 31 red cannon. As the sound fell, 2 huge fireballs swept forward, setting off bursts of dust on the ground in an instant. Boom! The red cannon landed on Ajuch's body without any mistakes, and immediately sent out a strong impact, rolling back in all directions. However, there was no sound of screaming in pain, only traces of aftermath shocks. Ryatsu seems to have disappeared. A team member tried to step forward to check, may have been hit to the point. However, just as he took a step, Suifeng was vigilant and exclaimed subconsciously, "Get out of the way." Before the team member could react, a huge crab-like figure rushed out of the smoke, waving its huge stone-like pincers in the air, forming fierce winds. Just the strong wind blowing directly disrupted the formation of this group of Shinigami. The previous serial control, plus 2 full-strength red cannons, did not cause any traces on the opponent. Facing the existence of this group of elite Shinigami, Ajuch's level of strength is enough to crush them. It is impossible for them who are not even counted as chairman fight this existence. It was because they were members of the 2nd Division, they were strictly disciplined and obeyed all of Suifeng's orders, so they didn't disperse and run away in the first place. If it were another team member, they would have been defeated if they hadn't encountered them for the first time. There is still a certain gap between the elite Shinigami and the chief executive. Shun, Li Hao, spread out step by step, and several black shadows flowed on the white sand, scattered to every corner. Thundering chariot, gap in the spinning wheel. This thing has lights clustered and divided into 6. The Shinigami soldiers stood scattered, chanting the kid mantra loudly, and the kid release was completed in just an instant. Baikad's 61 6-stick light prison. Dozens of light sheets blocked around the crab Ajuch's, fixing its 10 crab legs in place. Without hesitation, Suifeng immediately held the sealed state in his hand, and Shuinpa was on top of his head, with no emotion in his cold eyes. She held Zampiket high and pierced the head of the crab Ajuch's straight from the top. The blue-green liquid splashed out and suddenly lost its vitality. One-hit kill, as early as in the battle just now. Suifeng had already judged the Achilles heel of this Ajuch's. The battle was fierce and fast, and it didn't even last too long. It's just that the Ryatsu consumption of those Shinigami soldiers is a bit alarming, and they can't carry out a second high-intensity battle in a short time. There has been great progress in cooperation. Unfortunately, in the battle, it is still not decisive enough. The familiar voice came from a distance, and Suifeng's body froze in place. When hearing this voice, the eyes of individual Shinigami team members also showed disbelief. They are all too familiar with this voice. Suifeng turned around sharply and looked in the direction where the voice came from. A black cat stepped on the soft white sand and walked slowly towards them. There was a trace of complicated emotions in the golden pupils. Shihui Naruchi looked at Suifeng, who had been following him all the time, and greeted in a slightly hoarse voice. "Long time no see, Suifeng. Chapter 74 Capture Suifeng alive and send him to my palace, Shunite." Sui Feng's mood swings were far more agitated than Yoruchi expected. When Even turned into an afterimage, it flew towards Yoruchi's direction, the sealed state in his hand raised high, as if he wanted to take his life. White hit skill Bonebreaker. The afterimage faded in the air, and Sui Feng was already approaching Yoruchi's side. A pair of small palms slammed down from above, and with gusts of strong wind, all the white sand below was blown away. Boom! The dull blow swayed through the air, immediately creating a huge, deep pit, and Yoruchi's figure had already disappeared in place. Even in the form of a black cat, her strength is still stronger than Sui Feng, and there is even an insurmountable gap between the two. The pink cat's claw meatball stepped on Sui Feng's shoulder, leaped forward and dodged backward. After fighting Shendu many times, Yoruchi felt lighter than Sui Feng. The two are not on the same level at all. It can only be described as stress-free. Damn! Sui Feng clenched his silver teeth and made a creaking sound. The appearance of Shihoin Yoruchi directly made her dizzy, and she immediately forgot about the mission of breaking the competition. We must ask for an explanation. Sui Feng became ruthless from the bottom of his heart, and Ryatsu surged up, forming an endless haze of madness all around, with an astonishing momentum. Sting all enemies. Shuinpa moved, leaving an afterimage on the spot. Sui Feng chased towards the night, approaching the side of the black cat again in an instant. Her Zampakit was already on top of the black cat, and it might fall down at any moment. Suzumabachi, accompanied by the flickering light, the slender blade turned into a small blade attached to the fingertips, with a sharp cold light glowing on it. Sui Feng stabbed downwards without hesitation. But the black cat Yoruchi turned into an afterimage again and disappeared in the direction of its attack. Restore the original appearance, and fight me head-on. Sui Feng was angry. I swear this time, I will bring you back to the Soul Society. You can't escape. The black cat Yoruchi landed in the distance, and the cat's claws stepped on the white sand, leaving shallow marks. I didn't intend to escape this time. Her gaze is extremely complicated. Not long ago, Shendu explained a story about Sui Feng to her. This also made Yoruchi start to re-examine the tsundere girl who has been by his side all the time. Go all out, Sui Feng, Yoruchi said indifferently with a disguised arrogance. Let me see how much you have improved during the time when no one taught you. Facing the provocation, Sui Feng lowered his gaze, and his arms naturally dropped by his sides. Why do you? Do you think I must be inferior to you? She raised her eyes and looked straight at Yoruchi without fear, her eyes also full of complicated emotions. Haven't you ever thought about it? Have I been showing mercy just now? You and I fight. I will not show mercy. Is this what you think? That's why I said that you should not always be self-righteous and superior to others. Sui Feng's tone gradually became firm and full of confidence. I'm already stronger than you. The price you paid for retiring from the front line decades ago, you have to experience it with death. Yoruchi. As soon as the words fell, she launched the attack again. Like a ghost, a white figure appeared behind the black cat Yoruchi in an instant. Yoruchi's pupils shrank immediately, realizing that Sui Feng's Shunpa was much faster than before. No more hesitation. She immediately returned to her original appearance. As early as when he appeared in front of Sui Feng, Shendu released the power of the monkey spell, allowing Yoruchi to freely switch between the body and the black cat. And due to Shendu's extremely domineering possessiveness, he specially created clothes for Shihoin Yoruchi with a combination of demon magic and Hueco Mundo technology that can change with him. The overall tone is still in line with Espada. The combination of wheat-colored skin and white clothing has an inexplicable beauty. Shendu is extremely satisfied with his design. The faint brilliance disappeared in a flash, and a slender arm stretched out from it and immediately controlled it with a backhand, strangling Sui Feng's wrist. Shihoin Yoruchi straightened his waist, leaned close to Sui Feng's cheek, and whispered in her ear, "Since you don't want to show mercy, let's fight with all our strength." The familiar breath and familiar voice rang in his ears, accompanied by the warm breath. A blush immediately rose on Sui Feng's cheeks, and spread directly to the earlobe, ashamed, furious. Suifeng Ryatsu exploded, stirring the wind, and Suzumabachi on the stone hand made a surprise attack from the side at an extremely strange angle. However, Yoruichi seemed to have expected this attack long ago, leaned his waist slightly, and dodged it with a slight distance. But Suifeng's honing for so many years was not in vain. She hooked her wrist back like a scorpion's tail. Suzumabachi's blade just hit the right side of Yoruichi's waist. On the pure white clothing, a mark like a black butterfly suddenly appeared. B-pattern flower. Shirkai ability of Suifeng Zampakit Suzumabachi. When the blade on its fingertips hits the enemy for the first time, it will leave this mark on the enemy's body. And when it hits the B-pattern flower mark again, the target hit will definitely die. 2-hit kill. It can be called an unsolvable ability. The only downside, probably, is that it doesn't work for Ryatsu over Suifeng too much. Moreover, it needs to be hit twice to take effect. If you face an opponent with extreme speed like Shendu, you may not be able to hit even once, let alone a 2-hit decisive kill. If you get hit by me a second time, Suifeng said that she must kill Yoruichi, but she still kept reminding her of her abilities and tried to put water on her words. You will die. The afterimage exploded, and there were bursts of explosive sounds in the air. Shuanpa is different from ringing and spinning. It is not the ability of the space system. It is just the speed of the explosion in a short period of time. So that when all Ryatsu is used for explosive speed, it will produce the sound of air explosion that exceeds the sound of the ring rotation. The battle between the captains of the two generations of the second team caused bursts of air explosions in the air, like continuous thunder, and there were bursts of roars. Splashing white sand stimulate intestines. In just a few breaths of time, Suifeng, who showed his full strength, left a series of black B patterns on Yoruichi's body. With her white Espada dress and wheat-colored skin, there's a different kind of beauty. Shendu admired this scene not far away and couldn't help sighing. This kind of fighting still looks pleasing to the eye. That stupid guy, Grimjow, has no sense of beauty in fighting. Because of Cortez and Grimjow, the number of battles between Espada in the Void Palace is not less at all, even more. But these battles are often not very beautiful. Every time Shendu went on to be an audience, he felt as if he was staging a life-and-death fight. For this reason, he reprimanded Cortez a lot. However, Cortez always pleaded wronged, saying that the battle between Minos Grande is like this. Because this guy is constantly competing with Hurley Bell, and he doesn't care about the variety of poses. Shendu's heart softened for a moment, so he didn't say anything more. Just when he was dreaming, the battle in the distance had already entered a fierce stage. How did you teach me, Yoruichi? Suifeng was extremely arrogant, as if he had vented all the resentment of these years. Never expose your back to the enemy. But look at you now, running around in embarrassment, leaving all the words of the past behind. Yoruichi didn't respond to her words, but twisted his waist. With the help of a kick, several hidden weapons with a cold light flashed in the air, approaching Suifeng's face in an instant. Ding-ding. Suifeng raised his arm slightly and blocked the hidden weapon with Suzumabachi's blade. Is this inferior technique also used? A trace of sadness flashed in her eyes. Decades of neglect have already brought you down to this point. Just end it here. I will bring your dead body back to the Soul Society. I saw that Suifeng took off the white captain's feathers casually, revealing the special style of the Xingjuan captain's deadly costume. The upper body is in the shape of a halter around the neck, and the two sleeves are completely cut off. A large number of Ryatsu surround it, forming a strong wind, constantly winding and rotating. Seeing Suifeng showing such a gesture, a trace of surprise flashed in Yoruichi's eyes, and he murmured in an indiscernible voice, "Do you know yourself without a teacher?" Suifeng controlled the strong wind, raised his right arm slightly, and said in a haughty manner, "Surprised? It's probably the first time you've seen it. This is my original creation by combining white hits and kids' combat techniques. Although I'm not very skilled yet, it's enough for me to kill you." However, Yoruichi's astonishment was fleeting, replaced by relief. The combat technique of this move is called instant coaxing. She took Sui Feng's words and continued. Why is the Xingjuan commander's death fighter costume made in such a special style? That's because when instant hearing is turned on, there will be highly concentrated Qi gathered on the shoulders and back of the caster. By exploding it, injecting Qi into your own hands and feet, it will explode with astonishing power. While speaking, the white dress on Yoruchi seemed to be alive. The shoulders and back suddenly shrank to the waist, and the powerful Qi Ryatsu gathered on it. In the distance, the elite Shinigami of the second team looked silly. The infighting between the two captains seemed to be more intense than they had imagined. The aftermath of that Ryatsu escaping alone made it difficult for them to approach. It's exciting. A strange voice suddenly appeared beside them, which shocked the group of elite Shinigami. More than a dozen eyes fell on Shendu one after another, shock, fear, and other emotions reflected in their eyes. When the enemy unexpectedly appeared beside him and the others without a sound. If the person in front of him wanted to attack them, he would have been half dead just now. It has become a consensus among the players of the second team that the offense is high and the defense is low. They subconsciously try to stay away from Shendu one by one, but Shunpa hadn't unfolded yet, as if the sky-like terror Ryatsu covered them in an instant. Everyone's footsteps suddenly became stiff, and cold sweat continued to ooze out, even soaking the dead bully clothes. Every beat of the heart seems to be approaching death. A sense of suffocation, of despair, enveloped each of them. "Should be quiet." Shendu looked at them with a smile and said in a low voice, "Don't disturb the relationship between them. We'll fight." Looking at that kind smile, everyone felt like a devil smile. Their hearts felt bitter, and the expressions on their faces covered by masks were distorted to the extreme. Where did this guy come from? Is it Shinigami or Minos Grande? Although Shendu's identity is not known, it does not prevent them from standing still and not daring to move. The terror that covered Ryatsu's body was enough to break any Shinigami team. Just when Shendu set his sights on the battlefield between Sui Feng and Yoruchi again, the battle between the two was coming to an end. Yoruchi, after turning on instant coaxing, crushes Sui Feng in all directions. Sui Feng's Shuinpa speed, which couldn't even keep up with Yoruchi's shadow, was completely played. Seemingly aware of this, Sui Feng's style of play is more aggressive, and even has the idea of exchanging injuries for injuries. But even so, the huge gap in strength between her and Yoruchi still made it inevitable to lose. "You really disappoint me. I not only hate you, but I curse you." Sui Feng's face was full of grief and indignation. "Moreover, I'm determined to surpass you, and then arrest you with my own hands. I can't forgive you in Hydride, no matter what. I can't forgive you who betrayed my trust and admiration." Yoruchi's fist imbued with Qi Ryatsu's power stopped in front of Sui Feng's face, and the strong wind blew her short hair back. "Why?" In Sui Feng's crystal-clear eyes, mist already appeared. Tears slid down his cheeks, wetting the white sand on the soles of his feet. "Why? You didn't take me with you then." Sui Feng knelt down in front of Yoruchi sadly, muttering sadly, "Master Yoruchi." Yoruchi looked at Sui Feng in front of him with a little distress, and deeply realized the pain he had brought to her. Sui Feng, just when the two were touching each other, 10 voices interrupted their memories. "Although I can't bear it, I still want to remind you." Shindu's voice came from among the Shinigami soldiers. "Yoruchi, don't forget the mission I gave you." Sui Feng raised his head suddenly, with tears remaining on his delicate face. His fierce eyes were looking directly at the direction from which the voice came. After realizing that all her subordinates were suppressed, her eyes flashed with unconcealable surprise. "What mission?" She subconsciously looked at Yoruchi. Facing this sincere gaze, Yoruchi was really a little hard to act and sighed. "That guy asked me to capture you alive and send you to his palace." Chapter 75. Master Yoruchi, you actually joined Hueco Mundo? When hearing this, Sui Feng's pupils shrank suddenly, and the shock in his eyes could not be concealed. She has never seen this man in Soul Society before, and even heard of this idea has not arisen yet. she suddenly noticed the peculiarities in Shendu's appearance. White hair, handsome pendant, white clothes. Vasto Lord Shendu. Sui Feng stood up abruptly and subconsciously stood in front of Iruchi, with Suzumabachi's right hand in front of him, and Kid Ryatsu, who was instantly coaxing, surrounded him, forming a strong wind. Before his departure, he already got some information about Shendu from Yamamoto Yuanruzai. Also because of this, when Sui Feng realized the identity of the person in front of him, he suddenly felt like a formidable enemy. She doesn't think she's going to be better than Aizen. Too much. Even if Aizen behaves like a nice guy on weekdays, he rarely fights with others. But in Aizen's mouth, Shendu is enough to easily seriously injure him, and even complete abuse. With this kind of enemy, Sui Feng has no confidence at all. Don't mistake your opponent. Shendu kindly reminded. Yuruchi is the one you deal with. He pointed to the clothes on his body. Did you see that the uniform dress of Shuya Palace looks much better than the deadly costume in Haori? It wasn't until this moment that Sui Feng was surprised to find that Shendu and Yuruchi were wearing similar clothes. The head of the dragon on their chest is ferocious and ferocious. Sui Feng was shocked again, turned to Shuin Yuruchi with a stiff expression, and whispered in an unbelievable tone, "Master Yuruchi, you actually took refuge in the virtual circle?" Facing the questioning, Shihuin Yuruchi forced a smile and explained in a low voice, "Actually, my previous purpose was the same as yours. They're all here to find information about this guy." But, she shook her head, "The gap in strength is too big. He discovered it when I was in Shuya Palace. And then, there's no after." Hearing this, Sui Feng became calm again, and his expression was determined to the extreme. "I see. Master Yuruchi, don't worry. I will definitely save you back." Obviously, she believed that Shendu had somehow controlled Shihuin Yuruchi and threatened her against her. The urgent situation even made Sui Feng temporarily give up the ability to think. Now she only wants to save Yuruchi. No hesitation, no hesitation. Seeing Sui Feng's right hand with the Suzumabachi blade lying in front of him, Shunpa started and went straight to Shendu. "Really?" Shendu scratched his chin and said helplessly, "Is that how I look like a villain?" Yuruchi didn't interfere, but stood watching the battle not far away. Having fought with Shendu many times, she knows very well that with Sui Feng's current strength, it is impossible to win against a monster of this level. Instant coax. A large amount of white air blasted off Sui Feng's smooth shoulders, forming a smoky camouflage effect. A petite figure approached in an instant in the air current. Suzumabachi shone coldly and stabbed at Shendu's heart. Ding! The sound of gold and iron interlacing echoed in the endless desert. Shendu reached out his hand at the right time, just blocking the tip of the knife, and a little white mark appeared on his palm, which looked rather weird. Sui Feng was startled, subconsciously said, "How is it possible?" Shendu's power erupted, instantly knocking him out, and a bright flame flashed away in his pupils. "Nothing is impossible. You can't even beat Yuruchi, and you can't even break my defense." He raised his hand and looked at the palm. A black butterfly mark appeared on the concentrated part. But soon, with the activation of the horse's spell ability, the black butterfly imprint faded away bit by bit, and there was no trace left. Suzumabachi's Shirkai ability, strictly speaking, also belongs to the rule system. It's just that it relies too much on the strength of Ryatsu, and it must hit the opponent twice in a row before it can be activated. And this happened to be restrained by Shendu's horse charm. The moment Sui Feng realized the disappearance of Feng Wenhua, Sui Feng could no longer contain the fear in his heart, and murmured, "Homenoka is with my will and won't even consume Ryatsu in any way. How can this disappear?" Shihuin Yuruchi in the distance sighed helplessly when he saw this scene. Not to mention Fengwenhua, even Aizen's Kaika Sujetsu, for the current Shendu, it is completely neutralized, and it will not have the slightest effect at all. A strange ability. Shendu actually experienced it and praised. If you have Aizen-level Ryatsu, this Suzumabachi has a lot going for it. As a personal experience, sir, Shendu still highly respects Aizen. If he hadn't been prepared at that time, I'm afraid he would inevitably fall into the control of Kaika Suigetsu. If the Zanpakuto of Suzumabachi were handed over to Aizen, the damage it would cause would be even more terrifying. Once a thunderbolt strikes, the entire Soul Society will be buried with it. Oomph. I will definitely kill you and take Master Uruchi away. The annoyed Sui Feng couldn't care less, suppressed the previous shock, and Shuinpa to Shindu's back again. At the moment when the B pattern was printed on Huayin, her wrist shook extremely fast, and in an instant, it was in the center of the black butterfly, and another surprise attack landed. Two-hit decisive kill achieved. The black butterfly-shaped B pattern flower suddenly glowed red, like a time bomb about to explode. Seeing this scene, Sui Feng was overjoyed, as if seeing the result of victory. However, before she let out her big words, the red bee pattern flower melted like snow under the scorching sun, leaving no traces. It's been said to no avail. Shendu was helpless. Why are you so stubborn, girl? Sui Feng bit his lower lip lightly, with a look of unwillingness. She didn't want to believe in her Suzumabachi, just being ignored. Just now, Shendu didn't even seem to have the intention of dodging. Sui Feng responded with stubborn eyes, not listening to Shindu's words at all. She shunpoed to Uruchi's side, raised him with one hand, and kept away from the area. Shihoe and Uruchi didn't resist and let her do what she wanted. Because Uruchi knows best, as long as Sui Feng appears in front of Shindu, it is impossible for him to escape. Shindu let go of Ryatsu, who was suppressing the Shinigami soldier, and with a whimper, Sui Feng appeared beside him. Want to take people away by force? That's not okay. Sui Feng listened to the devil-like magnetic magic sound coming from his ear, forcibly suppressed the horror in his heart, and increased his speed again. After a few breaths, she just stopped. The distance here is enough. Sui Feng let go of Uruchi, raised his right hand, and the golden Suzumabachi glowed. Seeing this scene, Shihoe Uruchi slightly widened his eyes, a little surprised and a little relieved. After serving as the captain, have you mastered this ability? The strong Ryatsu surrounds Sui Feng, and the resulting strong wind even sweeps up the white sand on all sides, forming a spectacular scene that covers the sky and the moon. Shindu stopped on the spot, looking at Sui Feng's direction thoughtfully. Has it violated the ultimate move of stealthy, mobile dignity? After realizing the ability that Sui Feng was about to display, Shindu's indifferent expression also revealed a bit of excitement. Just to try the limit of the horse charm. Sui Feng's expression was firm, and a slender silver bar stretched out in the bright golden light, fixed in the white sand of the desert, and went straight into the ground. Bangkok, Jaku Rakeben. The Suzumabachi, which was originally a small blade, turned into a large missile like the tail of a queen bee. Compared with Sui Feng's petite figure and the missile-like Jaku Rakeben beside him, it formed a great contrast. You seem to know me very well. After casting Bankai, Sui Feng also gradually woke up from the previous frantic mood and once again regained the calm posture of the past. If possible, I hope that you can solve this monster without using the solution. This Bankai goes against my insistence as a stealth maneuverer. It's too big to hide and too heavy to move freely. The most important thing is its power. To call it assassination is too exaggerated. Sui Feng raised the Jaku Rakeben and pointed in the direction where Shendu was. The elite Shinigami who rushed to the battlefield were terrified after seeing this scene, and urged Shuinpa to flee in other directions. As the elite Shinigami of the 2nd Division, they have a super intuition for death. After realizing that their captain, Bankai, was pointing in the direction where they and the others were, the involuntary fear in their hearts made them feel as if they were being targeted by death. Urged on by this premonition of death, they even disregarded the so-called dignity of stealthy maneuvers. The extreme Shuinpa speed caused waves of dust to rise up in the desert and fly under the night sky. Escape. Stay out of the captain's attack range. Once upon a time, as the elites among the elites, even if they were killed, they would never have imagined that they would be so panic-stricken. Sui Feng locked on his Shindu's location with the sight on Jaku Rakeben and murmured firmly, I will definitely take Uruchi-sama away. Boom. The missile part of Jakku Rakebin, which looked like the tail of a queen bee, suddenly ignited a scorching flame, and the strong recoil force opened a huge, deep pit in its rear, and the quicksand inside it showed a crystal-like glass shape. The bright light blooms under the night sky, draws a beautiful and deadly arc, and flies away towards Shendu in the distance. And Suifeng, under the reaction force of this blow, rolled like a rolling gourd in the white sand, without any image at all. It was Shihoin Yuruchi who stepped forward in time and took it into his arms. Master Yuruchi. Shihoin Yuruchi's eyes were complicated, and he said slowly in an almost unreadable voice, "This level is far from being able to defeat Shendu." The reason why she didn't stop Suifeng's actions was entirely because Shendu had already given her instructions before she set off. It is important for Suifeng to realize the gap between the two. Only in this way can she give up those unrealistic fantasies. As it turns out, Shendu was right. After learning that Shihoin Yuruchi was captured for spying on the Void Palace, Suifeng tried everything to take Yuruchi away. Even releasing Bankai, who has not fully mastered it, is not hesitating. Jakku Rakebin bursts into the sky with a strong wind, suppressing everything else, whether it is flying white sand or stirring dust. Even the dense high concentrations in the air Lingzi, also under this blow with all his strength, parted a route of travel. Seeing the huge missile flying by, the corners of Shindu's mouth raised slightly. Not only did he not mean to dodge at all, but he opened his arms to welcome the attack. The flame grows, spirals up from the bottom of its feet, and surrounds Shendu. The violent Ryatsu turned into a huge, blood-colored beam of light, soaring into the sky, directly breaking up the faint mist lingering on the moonlight, forming a new sky, covering Hueco Mundo. The outbreak of Ryatsu this time made Espada of Qi Palace also notice the change. In the Leopard Palace, Grimjiao suddenly opened his blue eyes, and the tyrannical emotion flashed away, replaced by deep powerlessness. How did this monster become stronger again? He gritted his teeth angrily, growling like a cheetah. When can I surpass him at this speed of progress? Palace of Wolves. Stark let Lilinet fiddle with a new hairstyle on his head, and there was an unconcealable surprise on his slightly lonely face. It was only a short period of time since he fought Shendu last time. For the long life of Minos Grande, this time is but a sleep. But Shendu has already completed the progress of the extremely terrifying strength span. Even compared to Aizen, it's not bad at all. Lilinet stopped the tools in her hand, looked at Stark puzzled, and said curiously, "What are you saying?" "Nothing." Stark yawned, trying to cover it up, just a sigh. Because of the distance between the battlefield and the Void Knight Palace, only Espada noticed this extremely domineering Ryatsu. The others are all ignorant, continuing their own construction work. Shindu's eyes were burning, and at the moment when Jakku Rakebin was approaching, he directly raised his right hand, and his 5 fingers spread out to form a wrapping shape. Amidst the violent whistling sound, the violent impact finally approached, and the tip of Jakku Rakebin just hit Shindu's palm. Boom! Mushroom clouds that cover the sky, and the moon bloom in Hueco Mundo, adding a few different colors to the original red sky, like a picture scroll of hell. Shendu felt the scour of the flames, and there was a little more disappointment in his expectant eyes. Is this the strength? He held his palm empty, allowing the impact of Jakku Rakebin's explosion to dissipate on his body. The seemingly violent power did not cause any damage to him. Only the part where the palm was in contact with the front showed a bloody look. But it was only an instant, and it returned to its original state. When Ryatsu dissipated and the dust and smoke dissipated, Suifeng's eyes widened when he saw the landscape at the center of the mushroom cloud. She stood there with blank eyes and murmured in a low voice, "How could it be?" Chapter 76, Black Cat, White Cat. A good cat can catch mice. Shendu stood on the spot intact, not even the slightest mess in his clothes. The appearance of this scene had an unimaginable impact on Suifeng's 3 views. She couldn't understand that her Bankai didn't work at all, let alone taking Shihoin Yuruchi away now. It would be thankful that he could not be left behind. I used to have my confidence destroyed just like that. Yuruchi stood beside him, held him in his arms with one hand, and comforted him softly. Otherwise, why would I be in Hueco Mundo? Once upon a time, Shihoin Yuruchi, known as the Flash Goddess, challenged Shendu's speed countless times, but every time he ended up miserable. The speed of the two is not at the same level at all. Even if Shendu doesn't use the power of the rabbit charm, relying on his own reflexes alone, he can still completely abuse Shihoin Yuruchi in a normal state. Even if she activates the advanced state of instant coaxing, she still can't jump out of the palm of God. Good destructive power, Shendu praised. The only pity is that your Ryatsu is far inferior to other captains. Even Byakuya Kachiki, who took office at the same time, is much better than you. Shortly after the hollow incident, Kachiki Yinling stepped down as captain and handed it over to his grandson, Byakuya Kachiki. And Suifeng also served as the captain of the second team at the same time after mastering his own Bankai. At the same time, Shiba Ishin of the Juban team. Of course, as one of the five nobles, the current Shiba's single-minded strength is definitely far superior to that of Byakuya Kachiki. Even compared with other captains with far-reaching qualifications, they are not far behind. Suifeng is obviously the one with the weakest strength among the follow-up captain additions. Oh, almost forgot. There is also Karatsuchi Mayuri, who was almost killed by a junior from the Ishida family. But this guy's strength can't be judged on the surface alone. He is a type of existence like Urahara Kisuk and Sailaporo. The endless tricks make up for its slightly lacking Ryatsu and poor fighting skills. For people like them, science is the primary productive force. The enemy's praise is the greatest mockery of oneself. This is what Suifeng thought. She looked at Shendu unwillingly, as if she wanted to hit Jakku Rakeben again. However, reason told her that it would be the same even if there were 10 shots of Jakku Rakeben. With her current strength, it is not enough to defeat Shendu. Okay, today's warm-up is over. Shendu flicked his fingers, and a golden beam shot out from his fingertips. Backlashed by the power of Jakku Rakeben, Suifeng's speed dropped significantly, and there was no time to dodge this beam of light. Exact hit. Under countless shocked and horrified gazes, the black halterback death suit lost any support and fell to the ground, while the petite Suifeng fell from the air in the form of a white cat. Yuruchi reached out and held it in his palm, trying to calm his panic. Fat, what happened? There was a bit of tremor in Suifeng's voice. There is no change in Ryatsu, no change in strength, not even a slight change in the feeling of weakness after using Jakku Rakeben. The only thing that has changed is his own body. She looked at her hands in a daze, pure white cat's claws, without any strange color, similar to my previous ability to turn into a black cat. Yuruchi explained softly. However, this change is not under your control. Only Shendu can really lead this change. That's one of the main reasons why I don't want to run away from Hueco Mundo. Shendu rang and moved, and instantly came in front of Yuruchi, and the tall shadow directly enveloped each person and hair. Suifeng looked at Shendu subconsciously, and immediately showed a vicious look, and even blew his hair straight away. A ferocious little fellow. Shendu took the white cat, Suifeng, from Yuruchi, raised her front paws with both hands, and looked into her eyes. It seems that it will take a while to adjust. Shihoin Yuruchi sighed. His Majesty Shendu may as well let me comfort Suifeng. She may not be able to accept this fact for a while. By now, she had already given up on herself a little bit. The only hope is entirely pinned on the Soul Society and the present world. Hopefully the captains of the Guardians and Urahara Kisuk will have enough to deal with the king of Hueco Mundo. The arrogant Suifeng couldn't accept the fact that he turned into a cat. So much so that when she came back to her senses, 2 cat claws with pink fleshy balls frantically scratched at God's face. However, with her strength, it is not enough to resist Shendu's shackles. So much so that this scene looks like the owner is playing with the cat. Seeing this, Yuruchi sighed again, twisted his waist, and turned directly into the form of a black cat, and jumped onto Shendu's shoulder. Suifeng, just accept reality for now. Our strength alone is not enough to resist this monster. If possible, pin your hopes on the Soul Society. Her golden eyes stared at Suifeng. Your disappearance should attract the attention of the Soul Society again. Although Captain Yamamoto will not send a conquest team, he will be wary of Hueco Mundo. When Shihoin Yoruchi said this, he didn't mean to avoid Shendu at all. After getting along for a period of time, she has already figured out Shendu's character clearly. He has unimaginable self-confidence in himself, and at the same time has the infinite ambition of dictating the three realms. Even if the Soul Society does not take any action, Shendu will launch a war against the Soul Society in the following time. From the words of Espada's conversation on weekdays, it is enough to hear these intelligences. When they were talking, they didn't mean to avoid Yoruchi. Perhaps, in the eyes of Espada, Shihoin Yoruchi has been counted as one of his own. Master Yoruchi. Suifeng's crystal-clear eyes were filled with water mist, feeling wronged and unable to control himself. Actually, I'm curious about a question. Shendu suddenly interrupted the conversation between them. For a moment, the two cats glared at Shendu, one after another, complaining why this guy had no eyesight, interrupting the beautiful atmosphere. What's the difference between Shinigami and Hollow? Shendu didn't pay attention to their gazes and talked on his own. Difference in Ryatsu? Difference in soul? Or the difference between reason and civilization? When Suifeng heard this question, he was stunned. What's the meaning? Are you a vasto lord talking to me about the difference between Shinigami and Minos Grande? Shihoin Yoruchi stood on his shoulders and stretched and replied in a boring tone. There is no difference. The appearance of Su Yegong made me realize that Shinigami and Su are nothing more than two different species. It's just that Shinigami is at the forefront of civilization, while Su is a little behind. With continuous understanding, she found that her previous understanding of Minos Grande was completely wrong, even contradictory. The construction of the Void Knight Palace indicates that Hueco Mundo also has the conditions to establish the same civilization. If there's enough time, Hueco Mundo will also create a complete world that is not weaker than Soul Society. With Shendu and Sailaporo, what Hueco Mundo lacks is just time. Nice cognitive idea. Shendu turned his gaze to the astonished Suifeng again and rubbed her kitten's head. As the captain of the second team, you who have never seen the prosperity of Shuya Palace, what do you think? Suifeng stared at Shendu with resentful eyes. This appearance is the same as that of Yoruchi, who first sneaked into the Void Palace. But Shendu believes that under his training plan, Suifeng will soon change this thinking. Answer him, Suifeng. Yoruchi had no choice but to remind him. Virtual is void. Shinigami is Shinigami. How can the two be confused? Suifeng gritted his teeth and replied in a fierce tone. The breaking of the chain of cause and effect will cause a void to form in the chest of the soul. Once the void is formed, it will become a void that devours the soul unconsciously. But the Shinigami are sane enough to not devour souls at all. Our duty is to purify the void. How can there be similarities between two completely different individuals? Shendu grinned, showing his white and neat teeth, and his bright smile looked even more elegant under the moonlight. According to what you said, the Su should all be transformed from human souls. But as the king of Hueco Mundo, I unified the entire Hueco Mundo and conquered countless tribes made up of Zhou. Could it be said that after different individuals become empty, they will also form similar individuals? Although he has never seen the picture in Shendu's description, Suifeng can tell from his firm and confident tone that the other party is not lying to her. Besides, now she does not have the value of being cheated at all. This answer also made Suifeng fall into a silent minister. Soul Society's exploration of Hueco Mundo is only limited to the outer edge. The Shinigami who broke into this world without authorization rarely returned smoothly, and even if they did, they would not bring back enough information. For the Soul Society, Hueco Mundo is mysterious. As Yoruchi said, Okuru and Shinigami are just two different species. It's just a difference in position. It's too arbitrary to make a conclusion lightly. Shendu tried to inject ideas into Suifeng's cognition and change her current thinking. With Yoruchi around, it's not that difficult. Like this. Shendu stretched out his right index finger again, and a golden light shot out from the fingertips, falling on the unsuspecting Sui Feng again. The pure white and flawless cat fur instantly turned into a hard white bone armor, attached to every joint and face of the white cat Sui Feng. The originally restless mood gave birth to the idea of wanting to devour the soul. Sui Feng was taken aback by his appearance, and even more shocked by the thought that came into his mind. I'm clearly a Shinigami. Why would I want to devour souls? Could it be that she subconsciously discerned her current state through the reflection in Shendu's pupils? The ferocious bone mask, the bloody and tyrannical eyes, and the red materialized Ryatsu radiating from the whole body. All the characteristics, all explain her identity at this time. Imaginary, Minos Grande. Ajuches, Shendu smiled. The second level of Minos Grande, how does it feel? Shihuin Yoruchi, who was standing on his shoulder, looked dumbfounded. While the cat's mouth was slightly opened, the golden vertical pupils were also full of shock and puzzlement. She can barely understand turning Shinigami into cats. After all, there was already such a precedent for her before this. But completely transforming Shinigami into Minos Grande is a bit too outrageous. Simply unheard of. Even the group of lunatics from the Technology Development Bureau can't do this kind of thing, right? Even in the Hollow incident that year, Aizen just poured virtual souls into Shinigami souls, causing them to have hollows. Hollow destroys the boundaries between souls and allows the soul to sublimate to a higher level. It's completely different from Sui Feng's current situation. The change between soul and soul has completely broken her cognition of the world. Let's keep it for a while. Shendu is still very satisfied with Sui Feng's current appearance. Perhaps only in this way can you deeply understand the difference between Su and Shinigami. Because of wearing a white bone mask, the current Sui Feng is a bit like a Gala Gala. It's just that it's Gala Gala in the form of a cat. You mean, Sui Feng's blood-red pupils showed a little excitement. I can't change back to Shinigami. Certainly, Shendu took it into his arms with 1.2 and made her suffer the same treatment as Yoruchi before. If you can't change it at will, what's the point? Maybe one day, the Shinigami of the entire Soul Society may become a big girl. Looking at the mysterious smile on his face, the two cats subconsciously sketched that picture in their minds. Those familiar figures turned into Minos Grande, tall and burly, with a ferocious face, walking on the streets of Siri, communicating. They couldn't help shivering, and hurriedly expelled this picture from their minds. XD18. Okay, now I can show you the Shuya Palace under construction. Shendu often has great tolerance for these good-looking beings, probably because this is a world that looks at faces. With a snap of his fingers, sand waves like sea waves surged under the white sand in the distance, covering the sky and the moon. Linyaganka attends your majesty. The gigantic Minos Grande emerges from the sand waves. Linyaganka is only Minos Grande of Jillian level, but after passing Shendu to his errand car, he became the guardian of the desert outside the Void Knight Palace, and belongs to the jurisdiction of Nine Blades Lutheran Car with the ability to control the white sand. His combat effectiveness is considered extremely strong among Jillian. Bring these guys back to Shuya Palace and throw them into the arena. Shendu pointed to the group of elite Shinigami of the second team not far away, since there are many Minos Grande appearing in the arena of Siri. Then naturally, some elite Shinigami can also be added to the arena of the Shuya Palace. By the way, Grimjow and Cortez, one of these guys dies, one gets locked up. Chapter 77 Hurley Bell. I am very satisfied with your idea. Linyaganka would not have the slightest doubt about any order from Shendu. With relatively low intelligence, he will only unconditionally carry out all the orders of Shendu and his boss Lutherban, and responsible as the first line of defense, guarding the Shuya Palace. Under the complicated eyes of Yoruchi and Sui Feng, Linyaganka manipulated Baisha and swallowed all the Shinigami soldiers into his body. As it disappeared into the desert, there was no trace of Ryatsu's escape, and it completely disappeared in front of them. For Shendu's behavior, neither Yoruchi nor Sui Feng could find any words to refute for a while. As the captains of the second team, the two are very clear about the dirty side of Soul Society, whether it is the previous term or the current term. As Shendu said, there is not only Minos Grande in the arena. There are also Shinigami who violate the so-called laws and regulations, and even nobles. Void Knight Palace Arena. The building here is modeled after the ancient Roman arena, surrounded by auditoriums suitable for errand cars to watch the battle. At this moment, a fierce battle is going on in the arena. Grimjow turned into the Leopard King form, tossing and turning in it, and the blue materialized Ryatsu escaped and filled the arena. But even if he used all his strength, he would still be at a disadvantage when facing his opponent, even in danger. Ah, little leopard. Cortez slammed his fist down hard on Grimjow's shoulder bone. Suddenly, crisp, crackling sound echoed in the arena. The strength is enough, but your speed is still too short. The white bone armor-like glove was attached to Cortez's white palm, with sharp spikes protruding from the phalanx. With each attack, Grimjow is severely wounded. If there is no Shendu, judging from this battle situation, Grimjow will lose the opportunity to evolve the Carvasto Lord due to serious injuries in a few times. But ever since Shendu showed his miraculous recovery ability, these two guys have been completely desperate when fighting. Grimjow simmered with anger in his heart and let out a deafening leopard roar. The sound waves visible to the naked eye swelled around it and instantly spread to the entire arena. A transparent light curtain appeared in the air, isolating the aftermath inside it, avoiding the accidental injury of Arankar in the auditorium. This is a design by Sailaporo, inspired by Minos Grande's steel skin, assisted by Shinigami's number 81 Bakud splitting void, improved and improved, thus forming a protective barrier around the entire arena. Its defense strength can easily withstand an attack of the level of Wang Su's flash. There was roaring in the auditorium. Even with Shendu's suppression, Minos Grande's Arankar was still unstoppable. They hunger for battle, blood, and soul. So much so that the arena has become one of the most popular places in Shuya Palace. Shendu is not the same as Aizen. Aizen sees the entire Hueco Mundo as his tool, as a stepping stone to his throne in the sky. Shendu, on the other hand, wants to make Hueco Mundo the cornerstone of the Dragon Dynasty. Different ideas made Shuya Palace present two different extremes in the direction of construction. But there is no doubt that whether it is Arankar or Minos Grande, who has never been Arankar, they are very satisfied with the current life in Shuya Palace. They believe in Shendu devoutly and become more and more fanatical. The roar of the Leopard King set off a series of storms, spinning and whistling in the arena, affecting the concentration of the surrounding spiritual particles. Even Cortez's speed was disturbed to a certain extent. The battle between Grimjow and Cortez, the two most belligerent guys in Espada, has been going on many times. But the results are often the same. Or Ajucha's Grimjow, who is often the target of beatings. But this guy has a firm belief and has been defeated repeatedly. Not only Cortez, but even Stark has been challenged by him many times. Although Stark felt that this was meaningless, in a sense, it was also a means of resolving loneliness. So, while Stark yells that he's bored, he'll satisfy Grimjow's desire to fight. This also caused Grimjow to fail more often. Coupled with the fact that there is no Minos Grande suitable for him to devour in Hueco Mundo, the pace of evolution stops here. Grimjow's strength has also fallen into a situation where it is difficult to improve. In this regard, Shendu focused on the present world and the Soul Society. Minos Grande is not just living in Hueco Mundo. The Soul Society and the present world will also appear from time to time. Strictly speaking, at the beginning of the Three Realms, it was the creature Su who nearly destroyed the world. If the Spirit King hadn't used the power of extinction to destroy the void that devoured the soul would completely destroy the cycle of spirit particles, thus causing the entire world to fall into a complete stillness. If you find a right Minos Grande, you might be able to evolve Grimjow into Vasto Lord as well. At that time, perhaps his strength will not be much worse than Cortez. The strength has improved again. Cortez's expression looked a little excited. I just developed a new move recently. Just to deal with your move. As soon as the words fell, Grimjow had a bad premonition in his heart. He was vigilant in his heart, and when he was about to respond with a defensive posture, Cortez had already disappeared from his sight. What? Your reaction speed is far from enough. Cortez broke through the blockade of the Leopard King's roar with a ringing spin and appeared behind Grimjow. The Leopard King's claw appeared, like a blue light curtain tearing apart the sky, splitting behind him. However, his movement was already one step slower, and he could no longer reach it. Cortez took advantage of the attack of the Leopard King's claw, pinched Grimjow's neck and collar with both hands, and moved towards the sky. Its powerful force and weird force angle immediately made Grimjow spin in the air like a top. The blue light curtain formed by the claws of the Leopard King almost split the protective barrier of the arena many times. Cortez looked at his masterpiece with his hands on his hips, quite satisfied with it. It wasn't until the strength subsided that Grimjow fell from the sky and hit the ground hard, blasting a huge, deep hole. Damn God. He stood up with difficulty, trying to fight again. But at this moment, the ground in the arena suddenly turned into a state of sand. Tall and burly figures emerged from the mass of white sand, piled up until the shadows covered the entire arena. In terms of body shape alone, even if Lunyaganka is placed in Jillian, is an extremely large one. Before Grimjow and Cortez were talking, Lunyaganka's chin fell directly to the ground, and he spat out a series of dizzy figures from his mouth. An order from His Majesty Shendu. These Shinigami are temporarily being held in the arena for use in battle. But no casualties are allowed. Grimjow, Cortez, if any Shinigami are killed by you, you will be confined for a month. Obviously, this Minos Grande, who has reached Arankar from the Jillian level, is not enough brains. Not even Cortez. Even in the face of the two Espadas who are higher than him in terms of rank and strength, this guy still doesn't mean the slightest respect when he speaks. But Cortez and Grimjow are not the type to pay attention to such details. When they saw these Shinigami for the first time, their attention was already on them. For a while, Shinigami, the elite of the second team, finally came to his senses. When he felt the eager eyes of the entire arena, he couldn't control himself and fought with his legs. The audience present was at the Jillian level for the last time. And not far away, there is Vasto Lord staring at it curiously. Not to mention the elite Shinigami soldiers. Even the vice captain, who is the chief executive, can't resist such enthusiastic gazes, right? With the captain also taken away, they were desperate. We can only pin our hopes on the Soul Society. At the same time, the other end of Shuya Palace. Shendu has already returned smoothly with two cats, one black and one white. When seeing the grand building complex of Shuya Palace, Suifeng's eyes seemed a little dull, and she couldn't express her mood in words for a moment. These. She poked her head out of Shindu's arms and looked forward blankly. As far as the eye can see, there are clouds and mist on the blue sky, and a round of golden sun hangs high above it, making Hueco Mundo, which originally only had night, enter the era of day. The magnificent architectural complex is no weaker than any city in the present world, and even exceeds it in scope. Among them, the number of Arankars coming and going makes Suifeng even more frightened. You must know that the last Arankar is also at the Jillian level. According to the standards of the Soul Society's opponents, Shinigami who has mastered Shirkai is required to be able to deal with it. Not to mention, most of these are Arankars at the Ajucha's level. And from the perspective of visual effects alone, the construction of Shuya Palace is already not weaker than Siriidii, and some details even exceed it. Of course, the overall must be slightly worse. After all, Siriidii has existed for thousands of years, and the construction of the Void Knight Palace is still rebuilt on the basis of the original Barragan. Sailaporo's time, because part of it was spent on this. But all Minos Grande, with individual consciousness, whether it is Ajuchas or Jillian, are sent by him. This guy has authority second only to Shendu and Shuya Palace. Even Stark has been ordered by Sailaporo more than once. In Sailaporo's words, starts Infinity Cero works surprisingly well for building foundations. Hurley Bell has become a model worker in Espada. During the day, with its ability to manipulate water flow, it provides a large amount of water for the construction of Shuya Palace. In the evening, he was on time in Shendu's exclusive palace to help him with official duties, so that when he worked during the day, there were always black circles around his eyes. It was after Shihoin Yuruchi was captured that Hurley Bell had some free time. Of course, she was still not very satisfied with this arrangement. In Hurley Bell's view, His Majesty Shindu's care is the most important. Everything else is nothing but illusion. So much so that the way she looked at Shihoin Yuruchi always made Yuruchi a little creepy. Yuruchi, take Sui Phone to have a good look at some virtual night palaces. Shindu assuredly said, you will all be living here for a long time in the future. Maybe one day, after the Soul Society is completely occupied, you can go back. His words are full of ease, obviously very confident in his own words. After putting the white cat Sui Phone on the ground, the black cat Yuruchi also jumped off Shindu's shoulder. Looking at Shindu's faraway body shadow, the eyes of the two cats are extremely complicated, until it goes away completely. Sui Phone looked at Yuruchi and whispered cautiously, Master Yuruchi, shall we escape from here? Hearing this, Yuruchi's expression froze for a moment. Then he showed a wry smile, put the cat's paw on Sui Phone's head, and said softly in a comforting tone, Escape? Are you returning to the Soul Society as Minos Grande? Don't forget what happened to Hirako Shinji and the others. As a person who experienced the hollow incident that year, Shihoin Yuruchi is very aware of the dirty side of Soul Society. After the souls of Hirako Shinji and others were poured into the virtual soul and broke the boundary of the soul, the 46 office directly ordered that Hirako Shinji and others be handled in the manner of Minos Grande. There is absolutely no past love at all. This is why Hirako Shinji and others hate Soul Society so much. If Shihoin Yuruchi hadn't come to the rescue, they would have died under the punishment of the Soul Society decades ago. Now Sui Phone has been converted by Shendu into a Juche's level Minos Grande. If you return to Soul Society at this time, you will only be treated in the same way. Not to mention, Shihoin Yuruchi lowered his gaze, and after a moment of silence, he said in a low tone, Zuigong seems to be more free than Soul Society. Su's life is far happier than I expected, even surpassing those wandering souls in Rukongai. Having said that, she didn't go any further. Maybe she also felt that her words were absurd, and even she couldn't agree with herself. How can the life of a species like Su be described in terms of happiness? Let's go. Black cat Yuruchi shook his head, looking down at the magnificent buildings. Let me take you to see the construction of Shuya Palace. Maybe you can find the answer you want. Two cats, one white and one black, jumped down from the high tower and walked between the buildings of Shuya Palace. Hurley Bell, do you think they're going to change that old stereotype? Standing on the top of the tower, Shindu asked with a smile. Hurley Bell walked out slowly from the shadows. Looking at the two figures that were gradually going away, there was some confusion in his eyes. It was a long silence. I don't believe in Shinigami, but I believe in His Majesty. Shindu was silent, then raised the corners of his mouth again, walked to Hurley Bell's side, lowered his head, and whispered in his ear, I am very satisfied with your answer. Chapter 78, A Wonderful Encounter, from Aizen's Malice exclusively in Shindu's palace. Hurley Bell held Shindu's arms in his arms, and the corners of his mouth were raised in joy. There are little red marks on the brown skin, and the green eyes are full of satisfaction. She finds that she is most happy and fulfilled when she is with Shindu. This is why Hurley Bell treats Shindu more and more wholeheartedly. Your Majesty, if the Soul Society discovers information about Sui Phone's disappearance, will Hurley Bell frowned suddenly, recalling the white cat that Shindu brought back yesterday. While slightly worried, it was also filled with resentment from the bottom of my heart. There were already several contending for favor, but this time it was another one. Don't worry too much. Shindu is quite familiar with Soul Society. The number of Shinigami is far less than that of Minos Grande in Hueco Mundo. Even if a Juches is allowed to fight Shinigami one-on-one, there is still no opponent for a Juches with the Great Emperor. What we should pay attention to is nothing more than the powerful Shinigami above the seat. Some of them exist, and even I feel a little troublesome. He played with Holy Bell's blonde hair, his fingers running down the smooth back from time to time. But such a powerful existence must be restricted by the so-called 46 chambers. It's the same even if it's a new batch. Yamamoto Yuenryu-sai, as a stubborn old school, will never allow the strongest batch of Shinigami to enter Hueco Mundo. Their main task is to protect the court. Hurley Bell didn't speak, but quietly felt the throbbing in his heart. The hollow incident that occurred in Siriidia decades ago resulted in the escape of 8 Captain-class Shinigami to the present world. That's why I called visored earlier in the meeting. Speaking of this, Shendu suddenly raised his hand and pressed it between his eyebrows and said in surprise, "The arrival of Suifeng almost made me forget this group of guys. The disappearance of Shihun Yuruchi will inevitably make the visored in this world act. They're not the ones who give up their companions at will." Hurley Bell also immediately raised his head, thinking, does that mean that the Void Knight Palace will welcome new enemies again? Need to remind Sailaporo to take precautions. Shendu pinched Hurley Bell's face, and the dark blue facial lines were slightly deformed. No need. If Urahara Kisuk is also following along, Sailaporo's scientific research level is not enough to reach the point where he can be discovered. With the lessons from last time, this guy will definitely arm himself to the teeth. It can be said that if Urahara Kisuk wants to hide, perhaps only Santos and Espada can barely detect his tracks. But this guy's combat effectiveness is extremely low. Any member of Visored is enough to kill him. The scope of Shindu's soul power detection is also relatively limited. If Urahara Kisuk is careful enough, he will not be found at all. Actually, I'm more curious about. There is a hint of novelty in Shindu's blood-red eyes. Aizen, will there be any new actions? If he is not willing to be lonely, then Hueco Mundo will be much more lively. Holy Bell didn't understand Shindu's bad taste at this time. She only knows one thing. Life is so much better now than when she was wandering in Hueco Mundo. It's like paradise. If anyone tries to break this status quo, she will definitely make that person pay a painful price. No matter who Hueco Mundo. The outer area 300 kilometers away from the forest of Minos Grande. After Shendu completely unifies the imaginary circle, the location of the Minos Grande forest is set as the dividing point between the inner and outer periphery of Hueco Mundo. The central position inward is where the Shuya Palace is located, but those who have reached Jillian's level can go to live near the Night Palace. As for the issues of evolution and devouring, Shendu also used the ability of the sheep spell and the research results of Sailaporo and Kurasuchi Mayuri to create a blank soul similar to the righteous soul technology. You only need to pay the same amount of price to get the powerful soul devouring. The only regret is that the creation of this blank soul can only be provided to the existence below Espada. If Espada wants to evolve again, it is far from enough to rely on a blank soul. It must be assisted by killing and fighting, and it must be devoured by the soul before it can evolve. However, Shendu has already thought of a solution to these problems, but the time is still short. The wind and sand were blowing and whistling, and the moonlight was looming among the hazy clouds. 2 figures staggered on the white sand, heading towards the forest of Minos Grande. The seemingly slow speed is actually amazingly efficient. The last time I came to Hueco Mundo, I didn't have such a momentum. Under the cloak, Urahara Kisuk kept a dead fish face and couldn't stop complaining. In such a harsh environment, only Su, a species, can survive. Hirako Shinji also has a dead fish face and has no desire to continue at all. Really are. Why did that guy Yuruchi want to come here to investigate information? He put his hands on his forehead and looked into the distance. There's no end in sight. When will it take to find Su's base camp? Urahara Kisuk glanced down at the radar-like device in his hand. The 2 red dots that symbolize themselves are constantly moving forward. It is arranged in different colors according to the density of spirit particles. This is a spiritual tool he made based on the core device of the Lingbo Measurement Research Institute, which can roughly distinguish the density of environmental spirit particles. According to Urahara Kisuk's inference, existences at the Vasto Lord level like Shendu must live in the area with the highest spirit particle density. They just need to follow this line of thinking and go to investigate is enough. However, in a direction they didn't notice, a black armored figure was shuttled through the Hueco Mundo at an extremely fast speed. The wind and sand blowing up on the road covered the sky and the moon even more, making the whole sky fall into a coma. It's amazing speed. As expected of an elaborate creation, it is definitely above the level of Vasto Lord. Ikamer Jin followed behind the armor figure, recording all the data. He also wears a black cloak covering his Ryatsu. It's a pity that until now, there is no reason to see it. The little material Captain Aizen added to Shubai completely destroyed the possibility of him being born rational. Whether it's Jillian, Ajuchas, or Arankar, they all have the possibility of instant kills. Ikamer Jin wrote in the notebook in his hand, "In terms of destructive power alone, it's not even weaker than Stark." What a tough task. Captain Aizen was also summoned by Room 46 to reorganize the information on the day of the soul burial practice. Otherwise, there is no need to record these things. He stayed far behind Shubai, trying not to let his Ryatsu appear within the perception range of Shubai's probing nerves. Otherwise, in the current state of innocence, I am afraid that he will also be regarded as the target of fighting and devouring. Both sides are on the same path forward. If you follow the route, you will gather outside the forest of Minos Grande. The forest of Minos Grande. Santos, as the only detective Arankar in Espada, often wanders in the area of the Minos Grande forest and the Palace of the Void, and is responsible for reporting all abnormal situations. The way it flies with its wings has low consumption, amazing endurance, and its speed far exceeds that of ordinary glass. More importantly, his perception ability is the strongest among Espada, second only to Shendu. The strange Minos Grande, judging from the dissipated Ryatsu, is definitely above the Ajuchas. Santos let out a low voice under the moonlight. The number of virtual groups near the forest of Minos Grande has been greatly reduced, and there may be enemies lurking in the dark. At least 2 waves of enemies have already broken into the inner circle of Hueco Mundo. Your Majesty, please pay more attention. With Sailaporo and Kuratsuchi Mayuri's improved teleportation machine, Santos doesn't have to travel back and forth to deliver information. If any abnormal situation is found, it can be notified to Shuya Palace as soon as possible. Shindu stroked the smooth fur of the white cat, Sui Feng. Even though the guy grinned fiercely, he didn't care at all. Different from Shihoin Yuruchi, Sui Feng didn't feel at ease even after seeing the prosperity of Shuya Palace. On the contrary, he often wanders in Nilu's palace, try to use Nilu's innocent and kind character to help himself and Yi escape from Shuya Palace. However, Nilu, who is innocent and kind, backhandedly reported all her actions to Shendu, without any concealment at all. Obviously, between Sui Feng and Shendu, Nilu can still distinguish clearly which is more important. What's more, she seems to be a little curious about the mysterious things that Hurley Bell said recently. As a result, more and more time is spent around Shendu. After hearing the information from Santos, Shendu closed his eyes and concentrated, and he had already confirmed the identity of the enemy who had sneaked into the forest near Minos Grande. The Minos Grande on top of the Ajuchas, judging from the description of its appearance, should undoubtedly be in vain. Surprisingly, Aizen actually threw him into the virtual circle when he was supposed to be placed in the void of the present world. Even looking at this posture, it is obvious that they are coming straight to Shuya Palace. As for the other group of enemies that caused the decrease in the number of void groups near the Minos Grande forest, it should be Urahara Kisuk and the others in this world. As for how many people came to Visored, Shendu didn't care much. Their level of strength is too low, so there is no need to worry about it for the time being. In the present world, There's only one Urahara Kisuk that needs attention. Shendu picked up the white cat sway phone, made her look at him, and said frankly, "Aren't you curious about the gap between us? Now is just a chance for you to experience it." Before Sway Feng could refuse, she was held in Shindu's arms again. After several resistances were ineffective, he could only obediently stay within that arm. The black cat Yuruchi jumped and came to Shindu's shoulder, as if accompanying him. "Nilu is going too." Nilu doesn't care what Shindu is going to do. In her opinion, just being by Shindu's side is enough. During this period of time in Shuya Palace, it has already become her happiest time. And Shindu, who brought her beauty, is also deeply engraved in her mind. Then, come along. Shindu didn't mind either, and started to spin her directly. In order to keep up with Shindu, Nilu immediately returned to the blade, turned into a half-goat posture, and chased in the direction of Shindu Ryatsu. For a moment, two extremely strong Ryatsu crossed the Shuya Palace. Meanwhile, in the forest of Minos Grande, the 36th imaginary group up, Hirako Shinji moved his wrist, and the fiery lightning howl he had just released continuously made his wrist a little overwhelmed. It's clear that there were not many ghosts in the distance ahead. Why are there so many ghosts here? Urahara Kisuk slashed down with a knife, split a wild bull in front of him in half, let its spirits dissipate, and said without looking back, "Hueco Mundo's situation is more complicated than I thought. When I was the chairman of the 2nd Division 100 years ago, I came to Hueco Mundo to find suitable souls for experiments. At that time, Hueco Mundo was still very chaotic, not like it is now. He had held back for a long time before he thought of a suitable word to describe it, in apple pie order. Along the way, whether it is Sioux or Minos Grande, but not as full of killing and devouring as in the past. Under Aaron Carr's orders, they were carrying out the construction of the forest of Minos Grande. The two people who broke into this neighborhood undoubtedly broke the order, and naturally their whereabouts would be discovered. Of course, the main reason is that Hirako Shinji is too cheap. Cut off a Jillian's bony proboscis for no apparent reason. What a headache! Hirako Shinji drooping dead fish face. But before he finished speaking, the berserk Ryatsu instantly covered the entire Minos Grande forest, pouring directly like a flood that opened the gate. In just an instant, more than a dozen Aaron Carr figures rushed out from the deepest part of the Minos Grande forest. They're the Aaron Carr who guard the place. However, these more than 10 Ryatsu just continued for a few breaths of time and then disappeared completely, leaving no traces. It's like being swallowed whole by someone, eating it all in one bite. Hirako Shinji swallowed the words that came to his lips, looked in the direction of Ryatsu's voice with a look of shock on his face. "This Ryatsu, have we been discovered?" As soon as he finished speaking, a black figure broke into his line of sight. Undisguised, rampant, murderous intent shrouded two figures hidden under the cloak of spiritual concealment. When seeing this figure, Urahara Kisuk, who has always been calm, couldn't hide his shock and looked not far away in astonishment. In humanoid form, the whole body is pitch black, and there is no emotional fluctuation in the depths of the golden pupils, and the materialization of tyranny Ryatsu diffuses around it like a mist. In astonishment, Urahara Kisuk murmured, "Vasto Lord." Chapter 79, I would rather kill these two guys. As an expert in the study of Minos Grande, Urahara Kisuk immediately judged the level of whiteness. Definitely Vasto Lord. Standing beside him, Hirako Shinji's expression suddenly became exaggerated when he heard Urahara Kisuk's murmur. "Are you kidding me? How could Vasto Lord appear in such a place?" Without hesitation, he immediately drew the Zampakit. According to Soul Society's records, Jillian must at least be able to master Shurkai's Shinigami before he can. And Vasto Lord's combat power is even higher than the captain's. Hirako Shinji still remembers that when he first became the captain, that fellow Jingle once fooled him, saying that more than 10 Vasto Lords were enough to destroy the entire Soul Society. But later, after seeing Yamamoto Jinryuzai's dominant performance, he also understood the gap between Shinigami and Shinigami, and also understood the gap between Vasto Lord and Vasto Lord. More than 10 Vasto lords destroying the Soul Society is obviously exaggerated. But if only relying on Godei 13's combat power, if not counting as the captain, I'm afraid he will be killed cleanly. At this time, I don't mean to be joking. Urahara Kisuk also pulled out his red princess from the stick, and the dense Ryatsu bloomed on it. Spiritual cloaks can still hide our Ryatsu, but slain voids cannot. This guy was lured by the dead Hueco Mundo. Hirako Shinji glanced at Shuchuan's corpses that were gradually dissipating not far away. The corners of his mouth twitched, regretting his cheapness. However, at this time, there is no time to continue to regret. Shubai's golden pupils were already locked on the two of them, and without the assistance of No. 26 Bakud bent light, the spiritual cloak would not hide their figures. Immediately, the screeching sound echoed throughout the forest of Minos Grande. The sound waves visible to the naked eye erupted from its mouth, spreading in all directions like ripples. Ring in turn, Shubai exploded with astonishing speed and instantly approached his son Shinji, raised the sharp blade on his arm, and slashed towards his head without hesitation. The sharp piercing sound made Sheeping want to kill his eardrums. Ding! The strength of Hirako Shinji can be regarded as the strongest in Visored. As the captain, his reaction speed is quite fast. Holding Zampicut in his hand, he stood in front of him in an instant, resisting the coming blade. On the long, pitch-black arms, an astonishing power zone erupted. The sound of gold and iron intersecting 790 times continuously echoed among the quartz forests, and the aftermath that escaped casually smashed the thick tree trunks into pieces. Quartz tree powder is flying in the air like agitated dust. Shubai was not satisfied with the current battle with Hirako Shinji. When he struck sideways, the fierce slash with his left arm also pulled Urahara Kisuk into the battlefield. For a time, the scuffle started. "Kisuk, hold your breath," Hirako Shinji yelled and reminded. "No conventional means can beat this guy." Urahara Kisuk took a deep breath and stored it in his lungs, and took out a capsule and swallowed it directly in his mouth. Before setting off with Hirako Shinji for Hueco Mundo, he had already imagined the worst. Turtle breathing capsules allow it to hold its breath for a longer period of time. Fall down, Nishi. Hirako Shinji's Zampicut suddenly burst into endless light, and the end of the original slender handle turned into a huge ring. At the same time, a strange fragrance permeated the blade. At the same time, when he smelled this fragrance, the blade of Shubai's slashing arm also reversed direction and slashed towards the sky. The sudden failure of the attack made him freeze in place. In Shubai's sight, everything has changed, and the whole world has also turned upside down. The sky is below the feet, and the white sand is above the head. The quartz forest is like a stalactite, hanging upside down above the sky, full of infinite weirdness. Shubai tilted his head to the side, showing that he didn't quite understand the situation in front of him. This guy doesn't seem to have much sense. Hirako Shinji discovered the clue. Isn't it said that Ajuchas already have individual consciousness, and there is no difference in wisdom from ordinary people? What's the matter with him? Subai behaved like an irrational beast, without any wisdom at all. Faux Vasto Lord. Urahara Kisuk discerned some clues, and even saw some familiar places from Shubai's body. Should be with Aizen. Before he could finish his words, Subai, who was supposed to be standing there in a daze, attacked the two of them again. The smoothness of its movements is the same as before, even a little faster. How is this possible? Hirako Shinji was shocked. It's less than 3 seconds? You have already adapted to the ability of caressing. Before he could finish his words, Subai was already approaching his side, and the black blade with a cold glow slashed straight down towards his sky spirit cover. After mastering Shurkai for so many years, this is the first time for Hirako Shinji to encounter this situation. There is no deviation in the violent attack, and the move goes straight to Hirako Shinji's vital point, even pulling Urahara Kisuk into the battlefield together. One void suppresses 2 Shinigami. Red Razor. The strong Ryatsu on Urahara Kisuk, Zampicut condensed and fell forward. Ryatsu turned into a crescent-shaped red sword, split the air, and instantly approached the pale chest. Clang! The dull collision sound resounded above the black armor. When the pressure of the sword subsided, white traces appeared on it. Even the armor was not cut off. The defense is extremely high. Urahara Kisuke attempted to dodge one side with Shuinpa, assisting the fight with Kid against Hirako Shinji. His attack style is not suitable for close combat. Baekud's 61 6-branch light prison. Urahara Kisuke's Kid attainments are still very strong. After all, it is one of the few existences that can break, and Chant number 99 had 5 swirling dragons of destruction. 6 paths light sheets appeared around Shubai's surroundings, instantly restraining the arms that had just been raised and bringing them down to his chest cavity. Baekud's 63 lock bar lock. A chain as thick as a big snake flew out from the front of his palm, adding a blocking method to Shubai's body again. But in an instant, Sushiro, who fought Hirako Shinji, was tied up into a rice dumpling. Urahara Kisuke is afraid that it is not safe enough, and the way of chanting later will increase Baekud's blocking power. Thundering chariot, gap in the spinning wheel. This thing is clusters of light divided into 6. Baekud's 61 6-stick light prison. Suddenly, the light of the 6 paths light sheet that appeared outside became a little bit brighter again. Even Shubai's body made a tooth-crunching sound. The collision between the 6-stick light prison and the black armor made one's scalp tingle even more. Hurry up and get rid of him, Urahara Kisuke urged. He could feel that the 6-stick light prison and the chains were under considerable pressure. Hey, this should be the first Vasto Lord I've killed. While Hirako Shinji was happy with his mouth, he was also dissatisfied with the speed of his attack. However, the Ni Fu just raised before approaching Su Bai's vital point. A terrifying scream erupted suddenly. The tyrannical Ryatsu, full of bloody smell, turned into a beam of light that instantly illuminated the entire Minos Grande forest. The originally dark sky was also directly stained with a touch of blood red. The sky has changed. The originally dim environment was suddenly filled with scarlet, like a Shura hell. And the Baekud released by Urahara Kisuke, even under this bursting Ryatsu, was all shattered, turned into spirit particles, and dissipated in the air. Very far from the battlefield, Ikamaru Jin raised the corners of his mouth under the black cloak, smirking like a fox. Void is Vasto Lord. If you can solve it so easily, wouldn't Captain Aizen be too embarrassing? What's more, this guy has been devoured all the way. He squinted his eyes slightly, and the original azure blue eyes were also reflected by the crimson sky. Compared to the beginning, Shubai is now more than a little stronger. Bah! In the other direction of the forest of Minos Grande, Shendu hugged the white cat Suifeng and stepped on the sky, admiring the battle in the distance. His and Nilu's figures seemed to blend into the air, and they couldn't be seen at all. The power of the snake spell, although this spell is less effective in battle, is the strongest whether it is sneaking or hiding. Even Santos's Arankar, who uses his perception ability to the ultimate level, cannot withstand the invisibility ability of the snake spell. Urahara Kisuke, Hirako Shinji. Shendu recognized the two, and the creation of Aizen, Vasto Lord. What a wonderful battle. Subai is stronger than imagined. Judging from his current performance, he is not inferior to Stark. Strictly speaking, Stark is not at the peak level because of the split of Lynette. Moreover, they are both Vasto Lords, so the gap between them is not that big, and Aizen added a few more ingredients to Shubai. So much so that Shubai caught up with Stark in terms of performance. It's best to kill that guy. Suifeng rested his head on Shindu's arm and said angrily, "If it wasn't for Urahara Kisuke and the others, Uruchi-sama wouldn't have defected to the Soul Society, and he wouldn't have met you, a hateful villain. Shendu has evolved from the evil Vasto Lord to a vicious villain. Kill Urahara Kisuke and Hirako Shinji?" Shendu couldn't help laughing. "I'm afraid it will be difficult if you add that peeping Tom in the distance." Apparently, he has spotted Ikamaru Jin's trail. Even Urahara Kisuke's modified spirit cloak could not hide from Shendu's perception, not to mention the original black cloak worn by Ikamaru Jin. The shining soul is like the stars in the dark night. To Shendu, it is quite eye-catching. Their way of infiltrating can be said to be quite blatant. Pity. Sui Feng sighed, rather disappointed. After a while, she was already familiar with the days as a Juches. At the same time, the characteristics of Minos Grande lead to the gradual release of self, showing the true heart. Black Cat Yuruchi looked at his little follower worriedly, always having the illusion that his own child was going astray. Although that guy Urahara has gone too far in some things, he's not guilty of death, is he? She spoke cautiously, testing Sui Feng's attitude. Master Yuruchi. Sui Feng's reaction was more intense than she expected. This kind of guy who is not as good as a villain will only be a disaster if he stays in this world. If it wasn't for his research, you wouldn't have fallen to this point. The slightly sharp voice almost pierced Yuruchi's eardrum. Did you find it? Looking at the worried face of the black cat Yuruchi, Shindu reminded, as you think. After becoming Minos Grande, Sui Feng's personality also changed subtly. She no longer hides her inner thoughts, nor does she care about other people's opinions. Say what you want to say, do what you want to do, be willful and free, and do whatever you want. Yuruchi was about to say something, but the battle broke out in the distance again, and her amazing Ryatsu caught her eyes immediately. Freed from the shackles of Bakud, the blood-red Ryatsu burns all over his body. The whole animal looks like an evil ghost returning from hell. On the ferocious bone mask, the bloody mouth is slightly opened, and wisps of white steam escape from between the teeth. Dal! The screaming sound of piercing cloud and cracking stone set off a violent tornado, stirring up the clouds and mist in the sky in an instant, and plunged everything into darkness and coldness. Shubai bowed his head, his golden eyes fixed on the direction of Urahara Keisuke and Hirako Shinji. He opened his mouth suddenly, and a red spirit ball condensed instantly, and the air made a trembling, buzzing sound under the high-density spirit particle gathering. Even near its mouth, the space is gradually distorted. The power of this Cero is absolutely no less than Wang Su's flash. Nilu, who originally had a slightly playful expression, suddenly looked a little dignified when she saw this scene. Her special ability is Cero Reprise. However, under the terrifying power of Minos Grande Cero, which she met several times in a row, Nilu said that she couldn't repeat it at all. This inevitably made her a little disappointed. The torrent of spiritual seeds rushed across the sky, instantly turning the already red sky into an endless red. Neither Urahara Keisuke nor Hirako Shinji looked very good. Even if they are captain-level Shinigami, they still feel a little palpitating in the face of this torrent of Cero that can destroy everything. The shield of blood. Urahara Keisuke immediately put Hongji upright in front of him, pressed the air with his left hand, and the red spirit shield stood in front of him, forming the first line of protection. 81 of Bakud's Splitting Void. Although Hirako Shinji is not good at Kid, but that is also compared to Urahara Keisuke. If you switch to other Shinigami, its Kid attainments are quite good. 81 of Bakud's Splitting Void. Two transparent walls of light across the sky overlap instantly, isolating them in front of them. The rush of red spiritual seeds landed on the splitting void mightily, and countless dense spiritual particles bloomed in all directions like rays of light. Click! The first splitting void shattered into countless scorpions and disappeared into the air. Urahara Keisuke's expression was solemn, and he immediately chanted to strengthen the last splitting void defense. The proud son of heaven, the city wall built of iron, the dragon walks, the lion roars, the tiger roars, the wolf runs. Cut off the heaven and earth before it collapses. Bakud's 81 splitting void. The majestic and vast Ryatsu surged out from his palm, fully integrated into the splitting void in a substantive gesture. And the blank ultimate Cero also broke out its final power. The crimson light of ultimate, the mighty and endless torrent of spiritual seeds, instantly engulfed everything in front of it. Chapter 80. Why are female Wang Su so outrageous? The mighty, bursting airflow blooms directly in the center of the radiant agitation. Like flowers blooming in spring, they vigorously displayed everything about themselves. The white sand then swept across, rolling backwards in all directions, forming a huge uzumaki covering the sky, almost covering everything. The crackling sound is accompanied by the cracking sound of splitting void, which is especially clear in the storm. Hey, it's a bit exaggerated. Hirako Shinji stood at Urahara Kisuke's side, while reciting the kid mantra again, forming a defense against Cero's aftermath. The proud son of heaven, the city wall built of iron, the dragon walks, the lion roars, the tiger roars, the wolf runs. Cut off the heaven and earth before it collapses. Baekud's 81 Splitting Void. Before the splitting void released by Urahara Kisuke was completely shattered, the new transparent light wall just resisted it, eliminating the last aftermath. But the dust that filled the sky has not yet dispersed. A black shadow exuding an endless tyrannical aura rushed out of it, and instantly came to Hirako Shinji. On the sharp edge of the raised arm, there's a touch of pure crimson materialized Ryatsu, like flowing magma. Boom! The sharp blade slashed on the splitting void suddenly, and an astonishing impact erupted immediately, sending out circle after circle of air waves visible to the naked eye. The power of violence is undoubtedly manifested in Tsubai. Hirako Shinji lost for a while, and the whole person directly drew an arc in the air and flew to the distance. Tsubai had no intention of chasing him to make up the knife, but turned his attention to Urahara Kisuke. What a tricky guy. Urahara Kisuke was stared at by murderous eyes, but there was no sign of panic. He scratched his head helplessly, feeling a little bit back on his trip to Hueco Mundo this time. Try this. Shubai's sharp blade cut down, following Urahara Kisuke's shoulder blades all the way down, directly cutting the upper half of his body into two. The expected blood did not gush out like a fountain. This inevitably made Tsubai stunned in place and was slightly stunned for a moment. And on the half of the body that landed on the ground, there are dense and complex lines and extremely abundant Ryatsu. As for the figure of Urahara Kisuke, it appeared beside Hirako Shinji in the distance. The trip to Hueco Mundo was a failure. Before Hirako Shinji recovered, he heard Urahara Kisuke's voice ringing in his ears. Immediately afterwards, a big hand picked up his collar and dragged him to flee towards the forest of Minos Grande. Just as Tsubai was about to launch the revolving wheel to chase after him, the two bodies under his feet suddenly burst into a blazing light, like a small sun. The abundance contained in that Ryatsu became violent and restless in an instant. Before he stepped out, the body left behind by Urahara Kisuke turned into a bomb, making a deafening explosion. The blazing high temperature swept over in the light, turning into endless heat waves and completely swallowing the void. Under the high temperature, the surrounding white sand sublimated to the utmost, melted into spiritual particles, and disappeared into the air. When everything calmed down, the figures of Urahara Kisuke and Hirako Shinji had already disappeared into the vast Hueco Mundo. As expected of Urahara Kisuke, Shendu watched the whole process and said with a little appreciation, "It is actually possible to further complete the research on the portable prosthetic skeleton. A bomb double of this level is probably prepared for me, isn't it?" The appearance of Tsubai is definitely outside of Urahara Kisuke's plan. He and Aizen, one in this world and one in Hueco Mundo. Although Aizen at this time may have judged the approximate location of Urahara Kisuke in this world, he definitely did not find the specific location of Urahara's store. It is impossible for the two to reach a consensus before setting off. It can only be said that the relationship between Urahara Kisuke and Aizen is just the beginning. Thick smoke billowed and filled the desert. This is already located in the expanded Minos Grande forest, and the impact of this explosion on the Minos Grande forest is not small. But this level of attack is not enough to cause fatal damage to Tsubai as Vasto Lord. A streamlined body with black armor stepped out of it. A series of hideous traces appeared on this body, and a huge crack spread from the pale right calf to the crotch. However, with such a serious injury, there was no blood leaking at all. At the gap on its body, there is only a large amount of white matter constantly wriggling, very similar to the matter in the empty hole in its chest. Under the gaze of the onlookers, Wai Bai's injury recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just a few seconds, it was completely healed, and even the traces on the black armor were also eliminated. High-speed regeneration. Its ability effect far exceeds that of ordinary Vasto Lord. Ing continued to write on the notebook, and the defense power is amazing, enough to resist the full attack of the first-class Lingwei. The perception ability is slightly weak, and it is impossible to trace the existence covered by the Black Cloak. Head-on combat can overwhelm Hirako Shinji and Urahara Kisuk behind Shirkai. It was not until the end that Ikamura Jin added a sentence at the end. I haven't considered whether Urahara Kisuk has follow-up means. The general record ends here. It's time for me to run away from this Hueco Mundo too. After Shubai fought with Urahara Kisuk and others, Ikamura Jin had enough reason to guess that Shendu had arrived near the Minos Grande forest, a being capable of overpowering Aizen in head-on combat, and even defeating the autonomous Arrancar stark and scathed. In all aspects, there should be no shortcomings. A battle of this scale, if Shendu hadn't discovered it, it would be suspicious. Suspecting the so-called king of Hueco Mundo is nothing but a false name. Losing the Ryatsu breath of Hirako Shinji and Urahara Kisuk, Sushiro didn't stay in place for long. His goal is the area with the highest density of spirit particles in Hueco Mundo and all devourable existences encountered along the way. The forest of Minos Grande was just a small episode on his way to his goal. Just when Shubai set his sights on the deepest part of Hueco Mundo, Shuya Palace, two figures gradually emerged in the sky not far away, as if the curtain had been lifted. Shendu looked down at Shubai below, and there was a hint of interest in his blood-red eyes. This guy's performance has already exceeded his original impression of him. Sushiro, who was originally only able to fight with Shiba to fight evenly, has completely overwhelmed the combination of Hirako Shinji and Urahara Kisuk in the frontal battle. The only pity is that this guy still seems irrational. Whether it is fighting or fighting, they're all acting on instinct. Just like Hirako Shinji's caressing ability, Subai also relies on instinct, adapting and using it in a very short time. This ability to achieve victory in battle by influencing the senses. For a beast-like irrational existence like Subai, the effect is extremely weak or even none at all. For a guy like this, the best solution is to completely defeat him from the front. Standing on the devastated white sand, Subai looked up at Shendu, and there was a hint of excitement in his golden pupils. The Ryatsu that escapes from the Shendu's unconscious and the power of its soul itself. All let Subai come from instinctive greed, expand more and more, and become more unscrupulous. When seeing Shendu for the first time, the idea of devouring the guy in front of him was born in Shubai's heart. It was driven by instinct. Shendu's gaze dropped, staring at Shubai's changes. Seeing this guy's Ryatsu surge again, like a raging sea tide, rolling and covering the devastated desert. He casually threw the white cat Suifeng to Nilu, and let her hug Suifeng tightly to his chest. Feeling the strong suffocation, Suifeng rolled his eyes and muttered in his heart, "Damn, why is every female Arrancar Minos Grande so outrageous?" Holy Bell, Nelly Lu. The black cat Yoruchi jumped onto Nilu's shoulder and kindly reminded, "If you try harder, Suifeng will suffocate to death." Nilu quickly let go of her embraced hands and shook Suifeng, who was already rolling her eyes. "Really sorry. Fortunately, the current Suifeng has been transformed into Minos Grande by Shendu, and his survivability is much higher than before. It's not like being surrounded by Nilu's strange power and sending her away directly." Suifeng panted heavily, as if looking at a monster, staring at the female Wang Sunalu in front of her. Worse than Master Yuruchi's. She muttered something softly, venting her dissatisfaction. However, this sentence was clearly heard by Yuruchi, who was standing on Nilu's shoulder, and he even saw clearly what Sui Feng's gaze was pointing at. So much so that Yuruchi looked at his chest subconsciously, wandering between himself and Nilu with suspicious eyes. Is mine outrageous? Just when they were deciding who was more outrageous, Shendu and Su-bai had already met. The materialized Ryatsu surged out. Although they are both red, the color of the Ryatsu burst out by Shendu is deeper, and the temperature in the air is constantly rising. The faint sulfur smell gradually covered the entire Minos Grande forest. The surviving Hueco Mundo, while sensing this Ryatsu, began to evacuate the Minos Grande forest in an orderly manner with great interest. If it was just the previous ignorance, they wouldn't be so afraid. But once Shendu also intervened in this battle, the situation will change drastically. The aftermath of the battle alone may completely destroy the entire Minos Grande forest. At that time, Hueco Mundo, who is still in the forest of Minos Grande, will also be directly swallowed by the destruction. Even before Shendu appeared, Ikamaru Jin had completely stayed away from the battlefield and retreated to the periphery of Hueco Mundo. When he was in this world before, Shendu left a deep impression on him. With only one-handed strength, the shins behind his shurikai was broken, but he himself was not injured at all. Every time I think about it, even though Ikamaru Jin's psychological quality is superhuman, I still feel a sense of palpitation. In his opinion, although Shendu is still Vasto Lord, it has definitely surpassed the boundaries of Minos Grande and Shinigami and has become another dimension. A monster of this level is simply not something a normal Shinigami or Minos Grande can contend with. Perhaps only existences like Yamamoto, Genryuzai, and Aizen can fight head-on with them. Even Su-bai, who is also Vasto Lord and has been trained and enriched by Aizen many times, can only die when facing Shendu. For this, Ikamaru Jin has sufficient confidence. When a cloud of flames enveloped the sky above the Minos Grande forest, Ikamaru Jin stopped in place, squinting his eyes slightly to look at the sky, feeling the thrilling Ryatsu. It's scary. The corner of Ikamaru Jin's mouth raised slightly. Captain Aizen, if you see this scene, you should be very happy. The heat wave rolled over, centering on Shendu and spreading in all directions. The white sand under its feet even began to melt continuously due to the high temperature. Strands of flames were like clothes, protecting Shendu's body, burning bit by bit. Strangely, Su-bai did not attack immediately, but stared at Shendu with golden pupils, observing his every move. Do beasts also have the emotion of fear? Shendu looked sideways, looking at Su-bai with a slightly provocative gaze. As if irritated by the disdainful gaze, Su-bai opened his mouth and immediately let out a scream like piercing clouds and cracking stones. The sound waves visible to the naked eye even tore a little of the flame cloud in the sky. But soon, more flames filled it again, making the deep dark red sky even more dizzy, and even making the originally pale desert glow red, as if it was a hell day. Sui Feng looked at the scene in front of him. His restless heart gradually cooled down. Instead, it is the cold that penetrates into the bone marrow. Even though the surrounding temperature is getting higher and higher, Nilu's embrace is also abnormally warm. But Sui Feng could still feel the piercing chill spreading from the end of the tail to the spine. Is this the true strength of Shendu? She murmured subconsciously, trying to soothe the fear deep in her heart. Not really. Nilu tilted her head, as if she was thinking about something. His Majesty Shendu is also Arankar. The strongest state is of course returning to the blade. However, in my impression, there is no enemy who can make him fight in the state of return. Sui Feng looked at the figure in the center of the flame cloud. At this moment, Nilu's voice seemed to be gradually moving away until the end of the sky. She couldn't listen anymore. After hearing that this is not Shendu's full strength, Sui Feng's thoughts have already changed. Yuruchi, standing on Nilu's shoulders, did not do much better than Sui Feng. She had provoked Shendu many times before. I thought she had at least seen part of Shendu's true strength. But it wasn't until this time that Yoruichi realized that what she thought of as a fight before was just a joke to Shendu. The gap between them is so big that it is already unimaginable. Zéro toile. The screams were continuous, like the horn before the war started. Subai couldn't hold back the beast's instinct anymore, and launched an attack toward Shendu. Chapter 81 Enhanced Soul. Aizen Suk's plan respond to action. The afterimage remained in place. Shubai approached Shendu instantly, like a beam of light. The sharp blade in his arm instantly tore through the air and fell towards the top of Shendu's head. Shendu stretched out his right hand just in time, blocking the sharp blade in front of him. The blade that shone coldly fell into the flesh, but there was no blood oozing out. The strength of the Shendu steel skin is no longer what it used to be. If Shubai didn't explode with all his strength, it would be impossible to break through the defense of its steel skin. It seems a little impolite to fight like this. Shendu's posture is relaxed, without the slightest sense of strain. On Shubai's ferocious mask, no emotion could be seen. However, above the black armor, it suddenly swelled, and the slightly slender arms suddenly became thicker several times. The overall look gives people a feeling of deformity. At the same time, Shendu was able to clearly perceive that the power on the sharp blade of his arm had also doubled in an instant. This empty white, he touched the cold blade with his backhand, sank suddenly, and directly drove Shubai's body to stagger forward. Before this guy could react, Shendu swung his arm round and threw it directly to the sky, drawing a perfect arc. The power between the two is not on the same level at all. Shendu looked at his palm. A trace of blood emerged, but it recovered instantly. It seems to be a little strange. He sensed Ryatsu's restlessness at the wound, like a drop of cold water falling into a pan of boiling oil. However, under the power of the horse talisman, this abnormality was directly eliminated. The noble horse can drive away all external forces. There is poison on the blade of Shubai's arm. The gods 747 already knew the details in their hearts, and even speculated a little more about the purpose of Aizen's operation this time. Perhaps Hueco Mundo is also an integral part of the plan for Aizen. While unable to gain control of Hueco Mundo head-on, he tried to control Hueco Mundo in some other ways. Pity. Shendu reached out and touched the pendant on his chest, and a slender blade appeared in his hand. If it was before, it might have suffered because of it, but now, he disappeared in place with a ringing sound and went straight to Shubai. Boom! The violent slash mercilessly slashed towards Shubai, who had just stood still.
No more novels? Take part in the voting. The most requested novels and those with the most likes will be chosen for publication on euroaudiobooks.com. There, I can upload as much as I want without the risk of receiving a strike. Our 18 novels and other content that exceed what is morally acceptable are only published on Patreon or the free novels page. Remember, the site is funded by donations on Ko-fi and Patreon memberships.